Welcome to a Tuesday with Captain Garrett on the Swords and Starships channel. Hi, how are you? I'm not usually here on a Tuesday, but we're talking about Shogun. What a show this is, folks. I'm having so much fun with this show, I thought, you know what, I'm going to do a review stream. I never done one. It's probably no one around to watch, but whatever. We'll do it live. And I do believe I will have a guest joining shortly, so we're going to have a little fun on a Tuesday. Wait, what the hell day is it? It's not Tuesday, it's Wednesday. I'm saying Tuesday because that was when I thought I was going to do this, but it turns out the TV episodes air later than the Hulu episodes air. So we're talking about Shogun, based on the James Clavell novel of the same name. I have not read it. And I honestly don't actually know a lot about feudal Japan. I'm kind of more of a Western civilization guy, kind of a nautical man, as you may have guessed. But in any case, we are live on YouTube, Rumble, and, well, we should be live on Rumble, and X, formerly Twitter. And we're going to be talking about it. I am planning to just dig into feudal Japan because I just think it is a super fascinating era, and this show is excellent. And, let's go ahead and bring on our special guest. Joining us now live is a historian, a scholar, a warrior poet. He is Redoubt Productions. Ahoy, Redoubt Productions. How are you, sir?
Greetings. You speak way too highly of me.
Nonsense. Any historian I speak highly of.
Historian, history buff, something along those lines.
Hail, Wrangler. Wrangler's in the chat.
Welcome to our club.
Ahoy,
welcome
how
to
you
our
doing?
club. Welcome, Wrangler. Welcome, Wrangler.
And, it's not technically a captain's cast, so I suppose I should go with the generic background. But, so yeah, have you had a chance to, you've checked out Shogun, episodes 1
I
through
have.
3? What do you think so far?
Well, first things first, I must curse you for making me having to give the Disney mouse, the evil mouse, give them $10. Actually, probably 20 months when it's all said and done, because I think it's going to be running through April, if I'm not mistaken. There's 10 episodes, I think.
10 episodes. 10 episodes.
I could also just be making this up. Who knows?
So I'm going to be doing a live review after each one, so you're welcome to
join.
All
right.
Welcome to join. No
Yep.
pressure.
The pressure is on. I can feel the pressure coming down my spine. No, I am glad you got me to get watch it, though, because I can be honest, lately, I haven't really been watching any new content. Even the good stuff that people recommend me, I go, that means I have to devote time. And I could also just be reading a big, thick book by Ron Chernow over there. It's one of the Washington bios. So I'm glad I finally, you kicked my butt into gear to actually watch something new of quality.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, like, I just figured this being historical fiction, you would love it. I did not connect the Rumble stream. Damn it.
Oh, no.
Oh, well. Whatever. We'll just do without Rumble today. It's because you have to manually go in there.
Yeah,
so
I
annoying.
go for it.
And I forgot about it. So
that's usually the first thing I do.
YouTube and X.
Formerly known as Twitter.
First thing that comes to my mind when I'm watching this, because I also last year watched Blue Eye Samurai, which was, for me, one of the best series of 2023. I think it was in my top 4, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you had it up there.
It was. I mean, there wasn't a lot of competition last year.
Not really, no.
But what strikes me, they're kind of the same era, Blue Eye Samurai and Shogun. They're kind of, I think they're almost roughly the same essential historical events. If nothing else, I think this is taking place before Blue Eye Samurai.
Yeah, I'd give or take approximately about 30 years between Shogun and Blue Eye Samurai. Because oddly enough, I just watched the first episode of Blue Eye Samurai today as well. Because I'm going down that feudal Japan rabbit hole right with you. I'm like, I need more.
You think that's bad? This is what I'm thinking about doing because I want to do a TTRPG. And I got to tell you, feudal Japan is gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's brutal as hell. I think
Yeah, it
it's
could also be horrifying.
no, it's scarier than Westeros to me. I think I'd rather live in feudal Japan, or no, Westeros than feudal Japan, because it's like I had to go back. There will be spoilers for Shogun. The idea is, if you're watching the stream, you've already watched the episodes and you want to talk about it. So, in the very first episode, we have a pretty horrifying scene in which Mariko, who now she's not the daughter of Toranaga, right? Lord Toranaga.
No, she's not the daughter. I think she married into the family, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so she's married into the family, and so what happens is one of Toranaga's house gets very upset that he's being accused of treason and attempting to overthrow the Council of the Five Regents. And this samurai who has this outburst, basically, it's dangerous because he's literally threatening the balance of power in front of all the lords. And Toranaga rebukes him in that kind of very subtle way. I just love the political gamesmanship of everything in this period. And he's just like, surely Toranaga says, surely you are not insisting or accusing my host of, insulting me. And he's like, no, of course. And so then this samurai basically begs for the right of seppuku for himself and his entire line. Now, when I was first watching it, I was still kind of getting my bearings and I didn't quite catch it. So I didn't understand that was what led to what happens next. I went back last night and I rewatched it to make sure I understood. What happens next is his baby son and him have to die. So he goes to get his baby son to basically end his baby son. And his wife is clutching her son, is like, I don't want to give him up. And Mariko has to convince her to let the baby go because she's threatening to kill herself. And it's like, it's absolutely horrifying. It's like, oh my God, it's painful to watch. But what's so interesting is you think that Mariko is sort of cold-blooded at first, but then she, after she convinces, this woman to essentially give up her child, and stay in this life because there's a purpose for you here. You have to fight. You have to, I'm thinking, man, Mariko is cold as ice. But then she goes into the next room and she pulls a crucifix out and says, God, forgive me. And I was like, whoa. I was like, I am in for nothing is quite what it seems in this show right off the bat. So it's this show just goes right for the jugular. Right for the jugular. What do you think? Anything jumped out at you so far?
Well, there was a lot when we watched the first 3 episodes. So the future ones of these will be, there's a lot to digest because there's 3 episodes. A lot happened in those hour and a half because I think the first episode was over 70 minutes and the other 2 were about an hour each. A lot happened. Yeah. I will say, because I'm coming in, I have seen the 1980 miniseries, and I adore the 1980 miniseries, but it's sacrilege because I have not read the original novel it's based off of, though I'm sure some in the chat, they have probably read the novel, and if you had, please chime in. The big difference I can tell that this show's going for, where the original miniseries was strictly through the perspective of Blackthorn, like that was really... it was through him. You're getting everything through him. Everything's being interpreted to him, which created a sense of uneasiness because you had not, if you don't speak Japanese, you didn't have any idea if anybody else was saying. And then you didn't know, can you trust the translators that were speaking to him? This show is trying to give a more thorough overview of the politics behind it. Where Toranaga is actually being set more as the main character in all of this. I mean, I would say Blackthorn and Mariko, they get an equal footing as they do in the original, but in this one, Toranaga gets a considerable more of screen time. We get to see a lot more of the political machinations that are going on in the castles, what's going on, what is happening in Japan. Because in the 1980s series, and I think it is by extension the book, the tension comes from you're in Blackthorn's shoes and you're being told what's happening for all these interpretations. And just like you saw at the start of episode 2, where he goes in and meets Toranaga for the first time, and you have the Jesuit interpreting, and Blackthorn is like, I ain't buying into any of this. This guy's going to make all my words up. I can't trust anything. So I will say the suspense is a little bit gone here in the 2024 version, but the trade-off is we get to see all the inner machinations in Toranaga's mind, and it is awesome.
That's interesting because I feel that this show has got just crazy tension right from the beginning.
I still think it does, but what the 1981 its primary tension force, it's kind of spread it out to more to other peripheries of the show, to the storytelling. That's just my interpretation.
Yeah, and just to kind of set the table, I mean, basically the story is John Blackthorn is a Protestant. He's an Englishman, a Protestant who is allied with the Dutch. He has sailed on this with letters of marque, and I know you love that. I love that. And this is very important, too, because historically speaking, he is not technically a pirate. If you had, now from the perspective of an enemy nation, of course you're a pirate, but it is state-sponsored piracy, basically. It is the English crown saying you have official sanction from the government to burn, sink, or take for a prize any Spanish or Portuguese vessel you find, or sack any Spanish or Portuguese ports, because we're in a state of war with them, which is very common for hundreds of years before the, 1800s. We should bring it back, quite frankly. You want to put some guns on your fishing ship and start raiding the enemy? Go right for it. But we're more civilized now. But
are we?
More's the pity. I mean, we are, though, because I had this thought as I was watching it that we take for granted that democracy, not to get too philosophical on you, but democracy really does work out its ugliness in pretty civilized ways compared to how things used to be done for most of human history. Because feudal Japan, feudal Europe, they were brutal societies. They were societies in which you were either highborn or you weren't. And if you weren't, you lived as a quasi-slave to the landed aristocracy. And that was pretty much typical of human civilization across the world for most of human history. And when there was a conflict or a power vacuum, the almost inevitable result was a lot of bloodshed, a lot of people dying. The fact that we live in a civilization where our politics is about as ugly as it's ever been, but we don't resort to literal bloodshed, to that extent, to settle differences of power, it actually, it puts things in perspective, because, it's easy to think things are really going down the tubes, but then you think about it, and you're like, when a democracy is functioning, even when it's at its ugliest, it is working things out in a mostly peaceful way, which is kind of a thought I had as I was watching this.
And it should also be noticed that this show is set at the relative end of what was known as the Sengoku period in Japan. And this was a period of time, we're talking roughly the 15th and 16th century, where Japan's governorship was in flux. There were brief moments where Japan was united under a warlord, or what we would call what they called the Shogun, which is the military leader of everybody. But for the most part, it's all these different daimos. I can't speak Japanese. I'm a Yinzer. I come from Pittsburgh. We butcher all the languages. From all of these, I guess how Europeans understand it best, duchies, which is not the term used in Japan, but the best way to interpret it as all of these land owners, these duchies in Japan, and they're all fighting out for control. And this went on for several hundred years. You'd have brief moments where alliances were able to take most of the country and unify it. Those tend to fall apart in a few years for a lot of infighting reasons. So this was constantly in flux. And what we're going to see, the story of Shogun essentially is a fictitious depiction of the unification of Japan under the Shogun.
Well, don't spoil it, though. I don't know.
It's not so much spoiling it. It kind of happened. This kind of sets up how Japan becomes before the United States opens its doors in the 19th century. I will say that you're seeing a very fictitious version of how Japan was solidified into one union before we get to the period of the emperor returning.
Yeah, and so where we pick up is we have John Blackthorne. My name is John Blackthorne. I'm here to treat with your
Oh
lord.
God.
He's such a great actor, this guy.
Yeah,
That
I
he's
well, a couple
he
times I'll turn away
smacks
from
with
the
English.
screen and I'd go, I'm like, is Russell Crowe on the camera? And I'm like, oh no, I don't have Master and Commander on.
Yeah, it's Cosmo Jarvis is the name of the
Yeah.
actor. So he's this English privateer. He's trying to find Japan. Portuguese and Spain won't tell the world where it is. He sacks just a shitload of Spanish bases, and he steals their what they call the rudder, which is a log book that shows the navigational charts to find it. And he, pretty much his entire fleet dies of scurvy except a handful of men, and he manages to get to the Japanese island. So one half of the story is him blundering his way through an absolutely deadly society he knows nothing about, which is great fun to watch. And then the other half is Toranaga, played by Hiroyuki Sanada, who is excellent, and he is Lord Toranaga, and he's this enigmatic at first anyway. He's this very enigmatic character because you kind of can't read what it is he wants, and it kind of slowly unravels as the show goes on. And we're 3 episodes in now, and Toranaga basically is on the chopping block because he is part of 5 regions which are in charge of Japan until the previous shogun's heir comes of age and can take over the kingdom, the country. But what's really gonna happen is one of these or a couple of these lords are going to backstab the others, and it's a Game of Thrones. The Game of Thrones is on, and for
Absolutely.
whatever reason, Toranaga is the main perceived threat, and so he is accused of plotting a coup, and he is brought before the regents as a kind of hostage, and that's most of what the first 2 episodes are surrounding. And it's basically him playing this delicate game where we're all pretending that this is some nice legal proceeding, but what's really happening here is we're just biding our time until it's off with your head. And what's so great about it is Toranaga is he plays it close to the vest. He makes sacrifices, like basically having that member of his house commit seppuku, him and his son, his baby son. It's like he has this great line where he privately admits that he hates all this bloodshed, but he had no choice. So by the way, that's a great save the cat moment for his character. And we suddenly he has a lot of them in the show,
Yes.
but so does Blackthorn. Actually, Blackthorn is a bellicose, irritating asshole, but he's capable of learning slowly, very slowly, but he is capable of learning, and it makes him start to become endearing. And what I and just to put the button on this, where we kind of land at the end of episode 3 is I think this is turning into a buddy love story with Blackthorn and Toranaga. And if you don't know, that's not how the blue hairs think of buddy love. This is this is basically a friendship, I think, an unlikely friendship that is forming between these two men that is super interesting. At least that's where it seems to be going for me. And I'm just loving it.
I think one of my favorite moments thus far comes in episode 2, is where so Blackthorn, he's captured, he's been in prison. Toranaga hears about this white barbarian that's washed up upon the shore. He has interest in him, which is unsettling the other regents because they're like, why does he see interest in this outsider? What does this outsider have that Toranaga can want? And for a while, Blackthorn's being played as a pawn by Toranaga. Like, well, I'm going to keep him alive. We're going to put him in prison for a while. I'm going to keep these regents guessing what my plan ultimately is. Well, they finally meet where they can basically have a full heart-to-heart. They're not inside Osaka Castle anymore, so they can talk a little more freely. And he basically sets up basically Blackthorn explains how the Europeans view the world to Toranaga. And it's actually at that moment where I already can see that Toranaga's thinking, this man is going to be my key ally in things that happen. I can't speak his language, but me and him have a lot in common. And what is that? Well, I think it's that Toranaga wants a Japan where the Jesuit where the Jesuit and Christian experience is kind of thrown out and they revert back to the old school mentality of Japan. And the reason I mention is there's a few signs about this earlier. When somebody mentions side, like, so what would you ever consider about being Shogun? And the way he replies to Toranaga like, well, that's a ancient, thing. We don't do that anymore, which comes across as me as like George Washington saying he doesn't want to be commander in chief of the army. Like, oh,
yeah, exactly.
Yes. So the way he says, like, well, that's an ancient way. That's to me giving his subtle clues of what he ultimately wants in the world, what he wants to be done to Japan. And when you have Blackthorn come in and basically say, so, yeah, the Portuguese and the Spanish, they divided the world up in a nice, pretty line. By the way, this line caused a lot of problems in world history. So I was very happy that the show gave the time and the severity of what this treaty, I can't pronounce the treaty's name, the city was signed in, but it basically goes right down the middle. This is why you have the Portuguese in places like Brazil. This is why you're going to have the Spanish taking all of North America for a while. And this is why the Portuguese are going over there and trying to have exclusive trade rights with Japan. And that's been all perfect in Japan.
The Treaty of Tordesillas. Tordesillas?
Yes.
1494. And they basically decided, you get this half of the world, and we'll take this half of the world. Imagine
the audacity where Lady Miraco's going like, you can't, I can't tell that to Toranaga. And Blackthorn's like, I'm telling you the truth. I agree with you that they're out, they're ridiculous, but you got to tell them this is how they view it. It's at that moment they have that meeting and he makes that map in the sand of the world and how the Portuguese have divided, how the Catholic Church have divided it, where Toranaga and Blackthorn both realize, okay, we have a lot more in common, even though we can't speak each other's language. Blackthorn, he's a Protestant. He doesn't like the Jesuits being in Japan, so he wants to get rid of them. He also wants to get out of Japan. That's also a thing. We'll see that in a few weeks, how that goes. Toranaga, he wants to revert Japan to its old Shinto ways. He wants to get rid of the Jesuit influence that's been seeping into the politics. Because as we learn later on, 2 of those regions are Christians. And that's part of the reason
that was a great reveal.
That's why Toranaga does why he does the seesaw action with Blackthorn, send him to president, then bringing him back. It's because it's like, well, if those regions want Blackthorn killed, because he's going to tell everybody else, hey, there's more than just Catholics, there's other countries, and Toranaga nobody wants to hear that. So it would upset the balance of power.
Yes, the scene you're talking about was phenomenal because there was so much buildup. John Blackthorn arrives, and I love how he's polite at first. He's very polite. He's like,
he tries.
My name is John Blackthorn, and I am a humble merchant, and I would like to. And they're like, what is this barbarian dog saying? And he senses that they don't like him. He's like, how dare you, sir? You are an insolent. I'll piss on you, sir. And he just lost, and he gets his ass kicked, and he goes through this cycle like 4 or 5 times. I'm thinking, this guy's gonna die. There's no way he's gonna live because they can't find a translator, right? And what's the name of the character? I love the actor who plays this guy, by the way. He's the lord that's kind of helping Toranaga, the village lord, the one that was the one that boiled one of his crew members alive in the beginning.
What was it?
I have him written down.
Yeah, it's Yahushi. I have it's. Again, I can't speak Japanese. I'm sorry. I butcher every language. I
can't speak it either. I just do the best I can. What is it?
I think it's Yahushi.
Yabushige.
Yabushige.
Okay. Yes, and he's played by I'm going through the IMDb here.
For the record, Yabushige right now is my favorite character in the whole show.
He's great. He is a great character.
You don't know what he's truly doing because you could see that he is playing. Everybody's playing each other in this show thus far. Everybody's trying to play each other, and it's all for survival. Ultimately, they're all trying to play everybody else for their own personal survival. Toranaga, Blackthorn, and Yabushige is doing the same. And I can't say where it's going because I do know where it's going. But I will say he is my favorite character in the original miniseries. He's my favorite so far in the remake. Hi, Tom.
He's great,
Welcome
and
to the party.
he's played by what's the name? Hiromato? No. To Tadanobu Asano. That one I mangled. Tadanobu Asano. He's plays this character with this kind of he kind of comes across as a bit slimy at first. Anyway, I distracted myself. So John Blackthorne is brought before him, and he's like, "What does this white barbarian want?" You know, and so they bring in the Portuguese priest, and of course the Catholics and the Protestants hate each other. I mean, they hate each other. It is so, and so the minute that Blackthorne sees the priest, he knows that the priest is not translating him accurately, and so he's like, "This man is scum. He's awful. He's villainy. I demand someone." And he starts to get in trouble again. Well, finally he gets brought to Toranaga, and Toranaga, you know, he is like the Tywin Lannister of this situation. He is so brilliant, but he plays it so close to the vest, you know? And I don't mean Tywin Lannister's morals, just Tywin Lannister's cunning and intellect and just brilliance at the Game of Thrones. And so Toranaga immediately sees that this is a guy who can upset power. He's kind of, you know, Blackthorne is a wild card, essentially, in this Game of Thrones that's going on between these 5 regions. And so what's really cool is Toranaga gets he gets a priest to translate, and that scene is brilliant too. But even Toranaga's not totally trusting of the Portuguese. Plus, anything the Portuguese are, and by the way, I am a quarter Portuguese, so this speaks to me. You know, I'm a Portuguese. So I'm a quarter Portuguese and a quarter Spanish. So these are my ancestors, essentially. And so the Portuguese is not trustworthy to Toranaga because they're listening while they're translating, and he knows that's not good for him. So he gets Mariko in his court to privately translate what John is saying, what Blackthorne is saying. And they do a great technique with the camera here where at first they translate every word, but then the camera centers on Toranaga's face and then centers on Blackthorne's face.
We cut out the middleman.
Yeah, and it just does reverse shot of the two talking to each other but looking at the camera. It's very cool. It's very, very deftly handled. Again, adults are making this show. Unlike anything on D+. These are adults. Okay? And it's like the cinematography is gorgeous. The sound design, I love the opening. The opening is so brilliant. They do it like a Japanese sand garden. Instead of water, it's sand. And what struck me about that is every opening to a show now is so generic. It's just a CGI generated model of something. What was so cool about this is like, oh, that actually says something about the culture and the show. Anyway. So that scene you're talking about is great because Toranaga and Blackthorne have an honest conversation about, look, Toranaga, this is what the Portuguese and Spanish have planned for you. They believe that Japan belongs to them. And Sonata's performance is so brilliant because the look on his face is like, the fuck you say? It's so good. Without a word, he's able to communicate what did I hear? You know, he's like, Japan belongs to them. And he's like, I'm here to upset that balance of power, Blackthorne says, and I can help you. And then Toranaga says, well, the problem with that is they outnumber you. They've been here for years. They have bases everywhere. They have you outnumbered 5-1. The odds are impossible. And Blackthorne just kind of gets quiet for a second, and then he looks at Toranaga in the eyes and says, unless I win. And I was like, oh, I love this show. I love this show, man. Because, you know what's so amazing is modern Hollywood cannot write like men. Like men. You know what I mean? Like that's a man's answer. You know, it's like, by the way, it's insane. I'm not denying it. It's like he's talking about John Blackthorne is insane, but in many ways he's a classic archetype. And those are just killer applause lines you just don't get anymore. And I think we only get that in adaptations. So I love that scene. It might be the best scene in the show so far.
Now, I will say I think that was the best scene, but episode 3 was so fun because it basically was one I wouldn't call it a continual action piece, but that where the tension just was progressively mounting. Like, okay, how are they gonna get out of this situation? Okay, how are we gonna get out of this situation? How the hell are you gonna get out of this trap?
Yeah, that was very cool. That was there's that nice, and again, we are spoiling Shogun, so if you haven't seen it, spoilers ahead. But because this is kind of this is a post game show, so we're kind of assuming you've watched it, and now we're gonna chat about it. So like in the third episode, it all centers around how is Toranaga going to escape this castle. But what's so great is they don't tip their hand. And I do like how you kind of have Blackthorn and Toranaga are sort of having an equal share as the protagonists. And I think that works very well, the way they're doing it. Because Toranaga's like, yeah, we got to smuggle Blackthorn out of here because everyone wants to kill him because the Portuguese and Spanish want to kill him because he's a pirate and he's a threat to them. The Catholic Japanese lords want to kill him because they recognize he's an ace in the hole for Toranaga. Ishido wants to kill him because Ishido's the leader of the five regents, and he wants to take power, and he wants to deny anything Toranaga wants. He wants to deny him. And so it's very plausible in the mind of the viewer that this is the real plan, right? And the plan is we're going to smuggle him out. And, well, what actually happens is it's a plan to smuggle Toranaga out of the city. And he basically takes the place of the queen, essentially the queen mother. She's the mother of the shogun heir. And she pretends to get into the litter, which is, the little carriage that they carry. And then she slips out the back while the other samurai are distracted, and Toranaga takes his place, which is such a clever bit of subterfuge. And there's some great moments where John Blackthorne has to save the plan. There's some great moments where Toranaga has to think on his feet, and it kind of turns into a running chase because eventually the jig is up and they've got to race to the port. And then they get to the port and they got to escape a blockade. It's very awesome, and you get this kind of bold, daring do from Blackthorne that is just classic storytelling. It just reminds me of like the Count of Monte Cristo or the Three Musketeers, Treasure Island. It just reminds me of classic adventure tales where the hero, is often in an impossible situation and just has to either do something daring or clever to get out of it. And Blackthorne is that classic character. And there's a great moment where he's basically been left for dead, and he pulls off an excellent piece of seamanship and sails his ship narrowly past the blockade. It's a very cool action scene, and I love it because it plays into what he is, which is he's an expert sailor.
Now, I will say, because episode 3 brings up one of my favorite, I guess, would it be a trope, or would it be more of a plot mechanism where you have you have 3 or more sides fighting in a situation, because it's so typical just to have 2 factions. This whole episode is at least 3 factions, because you have Toranaga's faction trying to get out of there to safety. You have Ishido who's trying to stop Toranaga from escaping. And then you have the Christian regents who are involved in this, which they're trying to kill Blackthorn. And when they get involved, that's what basically reveals Toranaga's plot. And Ishido's kind of there for a while going, what do I do? He's like, I don't want him to escape. But on the other hand, I really don't want to get involved with this because this is just getting worse. Then they have a parlay with the Portuguese ship, with the captain, the Jesuits, to try to use their ship, which is more stronger, that can get through the Christian region's blockade. There is so many factions involved, and they all make sense. I'd say they're all equally balanced in the situation. But I do just love that Ishido just has that perspective there where he's sitting there at the harbor, probably watching something like, I'm almost curious, how are they going to get out of this situation? I'm here on land. They got to go through the Christians. They're really going to make a deal with the Portuguese. This is going to be interesting.
The deal making in this show is so good. It is so good because it's like, Yeah, I would say this is definitely like House of the Dragon. You know, if you enjoy the court intrigue of House of the Dragon, this show is like it's exactly on that level where you're always guessing like what political maneuver the character's going to do next. And so yeah, you have Toranaga and Blackthorn and Toranaga's house. They get on what would you call the Japanese vessels at that time? What were they called? Like
I
they called
well,
something in there.
yeah, now I know their ships really they ain't deep sea ferrying. At most, they can go around the coast and potentially across the channel over to Korea, but not too much farther.
Yeah,
Nothing compared to the Portuguese black ship, which is why they have to make the parlay.
they're actually roughly equivalent to a galley, which you know
Yeah.
a vessel with sails, but you also have to have rowers. And actually, that the Barbary pirates were still using, even in the 1800s, were using vessels similar to that. So essentially, they're like these galleys, right? And there's a bunch of like small boats, like fishing boats and such, that have blockaded Osaka Harbor, and the black ship is the Portuguese Spanish galleon, and it's just sitting there in the harbor. And so Toranaga is sailing for home, and of course the sharp eye of Blackthorn spots the blockade. He's like, wait a minute, you have fishermen out at this hour? And then they're like, no. And it's like, that's a blockade. And so Toranaga looks kind of, he's trying to figure out what he's going to do, because he's like, there's no way to run that blockade. And it's like, and Blackthorn says, I don't suppose this ship could withstand that many. And they're like, no, we'll get swamped and overrun. He's like, but they couldn't overrun that ship. And he points over at the black ship. And so Toranaga boards the black ship and makes a deal with the Spanish and Portuguese. And it's so cool because I love the fact that all of these characters are highly intelligent. They are all highly strategic in everything they ask for and everything that they want, and they're all playing a game that's like 2 or 3 levels deep, because Toranaga, as he's negotiating with the Spanish and Portuguese, knows that they will stab him in the back, and they know that he will stab them in the back. And so it's so fun to watch them kind of negotiate things that they know are kind of only that you can't take at face value. It's like, okay, I made a deal with him tonight, but the daggers for my back is coming soon, you know. So it's everything that Toranaga sort of barters with his enemies is a kind of band-aid. It's a kind of delaying actions, just buy him one more step on the board. It's very cool.
I will say also on a character level, I see each of the main situations that they get involved with in episode 3. Each of them are Toranaga's test for Blackthorn to see if he's catching on to what's happening. If this man really is as skilled as he claims he is. Because the first time we have the quite comedic where Blackthorn, throws a big temper tantrum. You're going through the litters. How dare you defile these women's, privacy, this and that.
Oh, yes.
So
yes.
Which is quite comedic. And even Lady Mareko's going like, "What? Oh God, he's gonna get us all killed."
Yeah.
But I do question if like Toranaga was kind of hoping that he would do something, like he would kind of like, well, Blackthorn's probably gonna do something really stupid here, and that'll save all of us.
Yeah, and so that scene is basically where in episode 3, where they're trying to escape Osaka Castle, and Blackthorn figures out that Toranaga is hiding in one of the litters, and the enemy samurai, Ishido's samurai, are inspecting the baggage train, and if they open up that litter, they're going to find Toranaga, and the jig is up, and they're going to slaughter all of them. And so Blackthorn is like, is no one going to do anything? No one's going to do anything? Then I'll do something. And so he makes this big scene pretending that he's offended, that they're going to look inside the litter and sully the womanly purity of these women and invade their privacy. The purity of a woman is sacred. And he's just throwing this big tantrum. And then later, Mariko basically is like, is that true? All your beliefs about the purity of women? He's like, oh God, no. He's like, London is full of whores. It's like, it's fantastic. But so he thinks on his feet, Blackthorn does, and he does dumb things that have kind of a method to their madness, and it makes you kind of like him in spite of how silly he is. But At first, I mean, because he's just such a bull in a china shop in the beginning. What's so cool though is that he's slowly, every now and then, he witnesses the Japanese do something that uh, either horrifies, impresses, or shocks him. Usually a combination of all three. And one of the best examples is when he's trying to save one of my other favorite characters, which is who's the Spanish sailor that he finds? What's that guy's name? That he's always trading insults with?
Oh yeah, I forget his. All I called him in the original miniseries was John Rhys Davies because he was played by John Rhys Davies. So even in the original, I forgot his real name because I just kept calling him John Rhys.
Dude, there it is. Vasco Rodriguez. Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yes, which he's
Played
also
by
great.
Nestor Carbonell, who he's been in a lot of shows like Lost, for example, I think, and I think he was in Lost, wasn't he? No, I don't think so. Never mind. But he's been he plays this. I love these characters because they do feel like they literally stepped out of the year 1600. They really feel that way. Like all the Spanish and Portuguese, English, they seem like they have stepped out of the year 1600.
Can I intervene briefly just to mention
Yeah,
if this show doesn't get some type of costuming award, then I don't know what then society is really doomed, which we are already doomed, but my God, the costuming in this series so far.
It's exquisite. Yeah. Like this series is exquisite. Like the period is beautiful. Japan is beautiful. They use CGI in very tasteful ways to show you sprawling period castles, but they don't overuse it because there's a huge amount of natural lighting. Like one of my favorite films ever is The Revenant with Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hardy. If you've ever seen that, it's about the trapper who basically goes on this revenge quest in 1820s American frontier. And great film. That film was all natural lighting, like real flames. If you see candlelight, firelight, that is what lit that film. There were no artificial lights, and the effect is spectacular. It's like spectacular to watch.
When you're going to do a historical piece, it is very important. If you can capture natural lighting, it's going to be a painful task to do it. Please do it. I will be very happy.
I don't know how you do it, but they find ways. Like I don't know if they went that far with this show, but the lighting is spectacular. Like the way that they're able to, at night you get the real sense of like torchlight and firelight. You get the warmth of that inside the castle.
Something NASA, something Stanley Kubrick contact them for Barry Lyndon something.
There's a great moment when Toranaga is he's awaiting his fate, so to speak. He's expecting to be executed, and he's standing there with, the most loyal member of his house. And that was, let's see, who is that?
There be lots of characters in this show.
There's a lot of characters, folks.
I got a small notebook here just to keep track of what was happening.
Is it Sugiyama? I'm not sure. Anyway, but he's basically his most loyal courtier, and he just says, "Share the morning with me." And they're both looking out at the horizon. There's this kind of moment of quiet, and you just see the sun. As the sun is rising, you see the light coming up on their faces, and then they look out at the horizon. And it's beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. So the show is exquisitely done. The costuming, lighting.
I think that was also Yabushige who was in that. Well, the two key lords that we know thus far is Yabushige, who's on the fence, as we've seen. Is he supporting Toranaga? Does he have his own ulterior motives? We don't fully know. And
You're
then
right, that was Yabushige. Yeah,
and then there's Hiramatsu, who's the older lord, who's so far seems to be unwavering supportive of Toranaga, albeit quietly.
Yeah, I had that wrong. You're right. Hiramatsu is his loyal right hand man, but I think that was Yabushige in that scene. And Yabushige is fantastic. This guy is.
Oh, geez, my favorite character so far.
He's super complex. He is super. He's got a lot of, let's say, I mean, the first introduction you get to him is he kind of just for fun, because just for I wouldn't say for fun exactly, but he has a fascination with getting as close to the point of death as possible. So, as punishment for John Blackthorn's temper tantrum, he orders one of Blackthorn's men to be slowly boiled alive. And Yabushige listens to this until the moment of the guy's final demise. And he's a little bit disappointed. He's like, it always seems to come too quickly. I'm just like, oh, this guy is a
This
sadist.
guy is, he's completely messed up. I don't want to
then-
have him here in real life, but on television, I go watch this guy all day.
Yeah, exactly. But then later, when Blackthorn and him are trying to save the life of Rodriguez, who has, he basically went overboard and he's basically being crashed against the rocks. They basically have to rappel down a cliff in order to save Rodriguez, and it's Yabushige who does this. And this is a great save the cat moment for Blackthorn, by the way, because Blackthorn, who's been mostly pretty much just like the Japanese to him, has been pretty much racist and disrespectful towards all the. He thinks of them all as barbarians, as they do him, and he watches Yabushige rappel down these cliffs, and he basically is able to. He falls and is nearly killed, but like manages to survive. Yabushige then drags Rodriguez onto the rocks to safety, who Rodriguez is unconscious, but then a wave comes in and knocks Yabushige into the drink. And now Yabushige is about to drown. Rather than drown, Yabushige pulls out his samurai sword and is about to commit seppuku rather than allow himself to be killed by the sea. And Blackthorn's response to this is like, what is he doing? What in God's name is the man doing? And then Yabushige's men are able to get a rope down to him. He doesn't have to kill himself. He climbs back up, and he is just absolutely, he's battered. He's breathing hard. And of course, the whole thing was that the whole reason Yabushige did it is because he could see that Blackthorn thought he would fail. And so this was his way of showing the barbarian how wrong he was. And so there's this moment when Yabushige is back on the top of the cliff, having just saved Rodriguez and survived death and being willing to kill himself rather than drown. And Blackthorn is so impressed, he bows. He bows to Yabushige. And it's such a great moment for both of the characters. And I'm like, obviously, none of these characters are quite simple. Like, all of them have different sides to them that are fascinating to watch unfold in the show. So yeah, Yabushige is great. Great character. And we have Ultimate Kahuna in the chat, says Blackthorn goes through a pretty substantial transformation, especially when he's separated from his men. And I have to say that, like, what I like about Blackthorn is, and kind of what I like about all the characters in the show really, is their first impressions of each other are, oh my God, these uncivilized barbarian Portuguese, English, Dutch, I mean, the Dutch are, let's just face it, but they still are. But I'm just kidding. That's an Austin Powers joke. But anyway, but then the Europeans look at the Japanese the same way. They're so uncivilized. They're such barbarians. But the more time that these characters spend with each other, the more they just subtly start to see in each other things that surprise them. And Blackthorn is starting to see in Toranaga qualities he admires, qualities he respects. And Toranaga, one of my favorite moments with him is he says to Mariko, to have her translate, tell the barbarian that I would like him to train a regiment of my men in the fighting tactics of his country. And I'm like, which is very smart, because Toranaga's like, I want to learn these foreigners' fighting techniques so I can use them and defeat them. And Blackthorn says, I'm just a sailor. I'm not a... Tell Lord Toranaga I would be honored. And I was like, yeah, good answer. Good answer. He's like, I'll figure it out. I'll learn on the job, which is pretty great. And then Toranaga says, also, the name Barbarian's not going to work for him anymore. And he gives him this like official noble title. So you see this grudging respect building between the two. And it's great fun to watch. And Ultimate Kahuna says his position is rather odd because he has a powerful position, that would be Blackthorn, but he is essentially outside of the typical hierarchy. Yeah, he's a wild card. He's an ace up Toranaga's sleeve, basically.
Oh, can we also just talk about too how there is a little bit of plot convenience, but I'm going to allow it where when they get to Osaka Harbor and Blackboard's like, hey, I know these guys because it's the people that I saved on the ship 2 episodes ago. It's the same crew, and the crew's just unwavering. Yeah, Blackford, let's go. We don't know what you're saying, but we'll follow you through hell and high water.
Well, I mean, maybe. I actually thought that it's kind of an old
Well, to be
trope.
fair, I think they came in through that harbor, so I guess they would still be there after a few days. So
I always have the thought, like, when he does the whole ruse of, like, objecting to them, violating the purity of women, to try and keep Toranaga from getting found in the litter. Like, I thought that was kind of convenient in a way, because what if that doesn't work? But then again, that's just but this is the story of how it worked. It's like, so it doesn't bother me too much. But I do tend to think, like, the Dutch are as alone in this place as he is. I mean, the Portuguese and the Spanish are their enemy, and doubly so because the Dutch have basically they sacked a bunch of Spanish forts, killed a bunch of their guys, stole their plans, and have found their secret land that the Spanish and Portuguese will kill you if you find. So the Dutch, whether they truly are loyal to Blackthorn or not, I mean, like, who else are they gonna like? He's their only lifeline, really. So they kind of have to go with him, I would think. Ultimate Kahuna says, I feel like being boiled alive would be at the bottom of the list of ways to die. I could probably do you one better, Ultimate Kahuna, because in ancient Rome, I think it was Caligula, the Roman Emperor Caligula, if I'm not mistaken, who was a great fan of the brass bull. The brass bull, which was basically, you had this sort of this metal sarcophagus contraption, and you would put the condemned into it. And so it's like being in a metal coffin, and there were all these sort of organ-like pipes that came out of it. And you would just put it on a fire, and you would roast the person inside alive. And as they were roasting, they would be screaming, and their screams would come through the pipe organ horns and make a kind of music. And that's why they called it the brass bull. And
kind of music, yes. Totally
and
what I want to hear.
And Caligula, who I'm convinced George R. R. Martin based the character of Joffrey on Caligula, like 100%. And Caligula, who was this boy emperor who was a total sadist and crazy as hell, was like, oh, marvelous. Do another one, So, like, I think that's at my bottom of the list. But I'm sure we could always think of something worse. Wrangler says the girls encounter a brass bull in the second book. Oh no.
Oh no.
There's a second book? There's a second Shogun book?
No, he's talking about, I believe he's talking about his own book series, Haley Starr.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm very curious how we're getting a brass bull in the sequel book, Wrangler. That's a turn. That's a turn in tone.
It's pretty terrifying. It's pretty terrifying. Yeah, that's I'll tell you, Ultimate Kahuna, that would be pretty low on my list of ways to die. But there was this show I used to watch called 1,000 Ways to Die, and it was always pretty fun because it was supposedly like real, like, crazy ways that people died. And like for example, one of them was a lady who got Botox, but she went to kind of like a hack who didn't know how to do it, and the Botox went too deep, and of course Botox is a paralytic. And so she went home after her Botox session, and she's having a nice soak in the hot tub, but then the paralytic gets into her system. She gets paralyzed, and she slowly sinks into the water. And that was basically what the show was. It would just be like crazy ways that people killed themselves.
I remember seeing commercials. I never tuned it on. I was just like, okay.
Yeah, it was trash TV. It was but you couldn't help but watch because you're like, did this really happen? But that seems like something that could definitely happen. So, yeah, I'm loving Shogun. So, any other highlights standing out for you, Redoubt?
Oh, let's see. I was talking about this line in the sand, literal line in the sand. We've talked about how the whole third episode is just a consecutive action sequence of how are they going to get out of this mess. I'm hoping to see because we are talking about a show set in late 15th century Japan, going into the 16th century. No, wait, 15, 16,
16th
17.
going into the 17th. 17th.
Yeah, I got myself messed up earlier because the whole infighting began all the way back in the 1400s. So it just all kind of blurs together that period of time. Since we're dealing with the Sengoku period, please give me firearms. I want rank and file firing like and I'm not even making this up. Like, people do not realize Japan, when we go into 1600, were the masters of the firearm. They were superior in terms of the Europeans in handling firearms and even producing firearms. The reason you don't hear about firearms in Japanese history is once the period of isolation began, well, they kind of curtailed firearms because, that was a threat to the ruling power. Funny story, an armed populace tends to threaten the government.
Yeah.
People think that's just something that just recently happened. No, it's happened all over the place. So we're in the very final years where this is the most efficient the samurai gun corps were at this point. So I do want to see them in action. I mean, we've seen them. We've seen the Teppo Tanegashima. Yes, was it Tanegashima? It's a very long name, the Japanese firearm, because it's named after the island they were manufactured, where they originated, which was Tanegashima. So I think the technical term is Teppo Tanegashima. I've seen them in the background in the first 3 episodes thus far, but we've yet to actually see them come to fruition. So I'm hoping we get to see them in action. Because I will say one thing about the 1980 miniseries that was considerably lacking: the action was very limited due to the budget of it being a 1980 CBS miniseries. Yes. So far, this FX version clearly got the bigger budget, and we've already had some fantastic action pieces that I was not expecting to see here. But I want to see them, and the Kahuna saying they're working on it. So I need to see volley fire. I need to see the glorious flashes of the muzzles in Japan. It's a very overlooked facet about the warfare in Japan this time period. Everybody thinks it's just simply samurai going out there with their swords and swinging the way. It's far more coordinated than just that. It's a perfect balance of, you have the cavalry, you got the archers, you got the spearmen, you got your samurai wielding the swords, and you had you actually had gun corps. You had to have them all together to make it work.
I think that's where we're headed. I think that's where the show's going. And I like, there have been some great action set pieces already, like the assassin in the palace
that
trying
sequence.
to kill Blackthorn. That was, oh man, that was blood curdling. And I will say that, like,
limbs going everywhere.
Oh yeah, like Blue Eye Samurai and this kind of make a nice twin set, I feel like, because they're both in similar time periods. They both are kind of a similar subject matter, and this is almost like a prequel to the events of Blue Eye Samurai. But they both do the samurai violence so well. But in this show, also there's a level of realism to it also, because it's like when those swords come out, they just cut through things like butter. And it's like there is just, and honestly, what I've always wanted was to see feudal Europe portrayed kind of this way, in like really intense fighting, because a lot of what we see in sword fighting in movies, especially when it's European sword fighting, is not really how the sword fighting would have looked. Because if you look at the original manuals, yeah, like they're kind of striking each other's swords and whatever. It's like in reality, there were all kinds of moves people would do, such as like grabbing the grip and like reversing the grip, disarming the opponent, using the hilt. There were so many deadly moves in actual like medieval sword fighting that I think would look great if you could get some like. There are these guys all over now, these experts like Guy Windsor, that just devote their lives to recreating those martial arts from the original manuals that still exist, and I just think it would look great on screen. But what I like in this show is it's pretty rare that there's a long exchange of swords fight. It's like generally, if it's the better swordsman, you're going to see limbs flying pretty quickly, and it adds a level of kind of fear and intensity when the action starts. So I feel like we're going to see the guns come out. I feel like we're going to see all of that. I'd love to see some ship's cannon. I was very excited when Blackthorn's like, oh, we got to get the black ship. I'm like, oh, is he going to take it? Yes. Oh, no, he's not going to take it. They're going to negotiate for it. Well, I guess that makes more sense.
I think in this situation it makes a lot more sense.
This show is so good, though. Like, it got me thinking, right? Because I want to do a live stream of a tabletop RPG, and so I found this. I found this online.
He found stuff, guys. Get prepared.
This is called The Legend of the Five Rings. Okay, and it's basically it's a tabletop RPG, right? A la Dungeons and Dragons, and it's about a fictional Japanese style fantasy world where you're basically like samurai warriors warring factions and houses. You're trying to get the Emerald Throne, and it's got like some really good. The artwork is fantastic. You've got some expansions already for it. Oh, dude, I love maps. By the way,
hey, look at maps.
Look at that.
I always take a map. Yes, I don't got no wall space, but I'll take another map.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, so any RPG that's got really good maps that you can explore is always exciting. What else have they got in here? I just think this could be cool. This could be super cool. So I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking this might be the one. What do you think, Tom? Tom in the chat. I know you're an RPG player. What do you think? I think that would be super fun. So yeah, I mean, why don't we have more stories about feudal Japan? Like, I remember hearing that Assassin's Creed was going to do a game set in feudal Japan. I'm like, why not? Why did they pass that up? Like, that's like a layup. That's an absolute layup.
There seems to be a very strong aversion from Western studios, especially relating to Japan. I've heard people say apparently the mainstream media are throwing a temper tantrum over a PC version of Ghost of Tsushima currently. I didn't read too much into it. I just saw the headlines before I came on. It seems to be a thing that they want to tap in and tell stories set in Japan, or I guess I want to say in Asia, but they don't quite know how. Not often. They're like having a version. It's like funny story. People like these stories of heroes. I can't speak. People like these stories that cut the fat out and just get right to the point. And I don't even think it's that people are really into the stories of Asia. It's just more the people like good storytelling. Funny story about that. There's a lot similar when you break down, you see how storytelling was done using feudal Japan and the Western. If you really break it down, you compare the stuff between Clint Eastwood and Akira Kurosawa. Both of them tend to have they have a lot of similarities in their themes. And yes, I know one's an actor and one's a director, but well, technically they're both directors, but you get my point. The Western and the samurai both share a lot in common, which lately you have not seen a lot of either in mainstream media. I wonder why.
Yeah, Tom likes Legend of the Five Rings. You like that idea, Tom? Yes. I think, you're right that like the Western and the Wandering Samurai, they're pretty much identical archetypes. But I also think you can apply that to the Arthurian legends and the knight errant wandering the kingdoms, in search of something. Like Blue Eye Samurai is basically a Golden Fleece story, where Mizo is looking for revenge, which is a classic Western story. Right? You're on the frontier looking for revenge. I'm looking for the man who shot my paw. And I think that is an archetype that will never go out of style. I was even talking about in a previous live stream how I feel that, like I saw that movie Argyle, which is just beyond god-awful. And I think what the saccharine quality of it that absolutely just kills me, and I see this in a lot of modern movies now, is that we're sort of cloning tropes which are already sort of clones of clones of clones of what was once an original concept. And I just was thinking about, like, what is the original Ian Fleming James Bond concept. And it's like, well, essentially, James Bond is a samurai or a knight errant or a Western, you know, lawman, let's say, but he has been imported into the world of the Soviet Cold War spy era. And that's basically what he is. And he represents that sort of knight errant character who goes to exotic places, discovers exotic villains, exotic allies, uses, in his case, technology is like a stand-in, like his gadgets is like a stand-in. I'm probably reading too much into it. This is just my thoughts on it. It's like a stand-in for like Merlin's magic in the Arthurian legend, or strange things that John Blackthorne is discovering in Japan, and that's the experience that James Bond is bringing to the viewer or the reader. James Bond is bringing you this exotic world that you can't see because you can't, like, you don't have the Aston Martin and all the cool gadgets and the mission and a license to kill, to go around the world experiencing all these things. So he's bringing those things to you, right? And that's why I'm so offended when I see something like Argyle, because Argyle is just referential of memes that are referential of James Bond. And so there's no actual real experience anywhere in that. They're just memeing on something.
Yeah, when they reference and meme on it, they're not doing it because they love it. They do it because they hate it. They're doing it out of spite. They're doing it out of vitriol. Like, oh, this stuff's so awful, so we're going to make fun of it in this vindictive way. And it's like, no. Like,
I don't know that they do that. I don't know that Argyle was doing it. Argyle was a more kind of pathetic situation. It was, I mean, it reminded me of a kind of like a TV commercial. It reminded me of a TV commercial for a car or something. Just that it was so artificial. But I feel like it really was, whoever wrote that was basically drawing on the idea of they were writing about the tropes. They weren't writing about the original concept or trying to present something new. They were just simply reusing the tropes and thinking that that's fun. And I mean, it can be, but it's just been so done to death. It would be, it's like Seth MacFarlane doing his 1,000 Ways to Die in the West movie, which is intentionally a parody of tropes. But even that movie, I watched it and I was like, but these are parodies of tropes that themselves are a kind of referential trope. The idea that, like, oh, there's gonna be a gunfight in the middle of the street. Like, that's such an old recycled trope. So I guess what I'm saying is there's been too many copies of copies, and we need to get back to like the actual reality that we were supposed to experience with these types of tropes.
I think there's, when it comes to storytelling, you'll usually find a trend, and it's more of a recent trend, where you'll have the concept, you'll have people improve upon it, expand upon it, make big bombastic versions of it, and then comes the parody when it's like, okay, this is getting ridiculous. And parody's good thing from time to time. It is good to laugh at ourselves like, oh, look at this crap. Like, oh my God, look how much we've gone down this rabbit hole. But after the parody moment has to come to okay, let's strip everything back down. What is the essence? What is that we truly love out of this? And then it kind of begins anew with some new elements mixing in, and it kind of, the cycle repeats itself. Bigger, bigger, bigger parody, shrink to your basics. I'm not saying it's a perfect cycle. Like, I'm saying this happens for everything, but I think it's happened the past 100 years at least with motion picture storytelling. But I noticed a lot lately, there's a lot of storytelling elements where we got into the parody point and we've kind of been stuck in the parody point for years, and nobody's tried to go back to basics. Everybody's like, no, we want to have our cake and pie at the same time.
Yeah, well, in the case of Argyle, like, there actually is a way to do that story in a way that's really good. And there was a great film with Gina Davis called The Long Kiss Goodnight. And that film actually does do that concept very well. She's this homemaker, suburban housewife with a boring life, and suddenly, like, people are trying to kill her and she doesn't know why. And if I do remember, I think it was Samuel L. Jackson who just comes out of nowhere and tells her she's a spy and that she's an amnesiac spy. She doesn't remember. And so the movie is kind of her first not believing it, but then suddenly she's able to do something she can't do, and by the end of the film, she gets her memories back and she's a badass again. And it's a fantastic movie. And it does it well because it does it with a level of like, it's a well told story. It's a well put together plot. And the problem with Argyle is it's just peak lazy. But getting back to how I think it relates to Shogun is it's like you're seeing two archetypes in this show that I think we have lost, even with our modern tropes, even with like James Bond characters and stuff like that. You're seeing the samurai lord in the case of Toranaga, and it's fantastic. And you're also seeing the English adventurer, the English adventure of John Blackthorne. And it's like, this is a lost art, characters like this. It's like, whatever happened? Yeah, he's not like a super good guy, like he's basically has abandoned his family in England, his wife and his kids. He's like, I was bored in England. I really hated it there. So I left and I decided to sail the oceans. And I'm like, yeah, that's a dick move, man. It sucks for your wife, I guess. So I'm not saying he's like the most lovable character all the time, but I do think that there's an element of that, like, wrestling the world by the tail mentality, that adventurer mindset that we've lost, wanting an adventure and going on one. So that's one of the elements of this I really love. But again,
one of the craziest things in the human history is that we went to the moon, and then for many years we just kind of, we went to the moon. That's that.
Yeah,
we've done it.
We put our flag up there, and
we did it.
Well, look,
and then we kind of just became
be
recluses.
The moon is terrible real estate. Okay, like
it really is, but
it's missing a lot of value in terms of real estate. Like, there's no bodies of water, nearby anything. There might be some nice views from the tops of the craters. But like one thing that tends to bring down the real estate value is a lack of air. There's no air. So that sucks. So there's, by the way, if anyone thinks the moon landing was fake, I highly recommend a podcast by Bill Whittle called What We Saw. And it's absolutely fantastic. It's like a 10-part series, and he grew up in the era of the moon landing.
They'll deflect, and it'll confirm. It's not rocket science, folks. It's really not anymore. It was to get up there, but not now.
Yeah, he goes through all the things that debunk the myth that it was fake. But like one of the most and there's plenty of things you could do. Like you can get with an amateur astronomer's kit, you can get a laser that you can point at the reflector that's still there, left by the lander, and you can get the return light from that to prove it to yourself. So there's ways you could do it as an amateur astronomer to prove that it was real. However, he points out that in all the footage, which is supposedly fake, of them landing on the surface, if you look at the footage, you will see that the dust on the moon from the rocket propellant, it is moving around almost like mud. It's moving around like a muddy wash, like if you had like a pressure washer and you were just spraying mud around. And he said the reason why is because there's no air, so it does not rise like a cloud of dust. You would expect it to rise like a cloud of dust, but it only would do that in an atmosphere. In an airless environment, it's like pushing around mud.
Yeah.
And so that's just one little detail that kind of shows that, like, that's not something you could really fake in a movie studio because A, it would be difficult, and B, you wouldn't even think of that. Nobody would think of that. If you were a movie producer trying to fake the moon landing, you would have dust rising up and nobody would question it because that's what we are naturally going to expect to see. But that's not what we see.
Yeah. I just bring up the moon landing as a possible answer. When you bring up these old tropes, adventure tropes that just kind of disappeared, is because, well, at least the United States of America, we made it to the moon, something nobody else has done. Okay, there's nothing else to do. Okay, that's it. Where American history, world history done. I think there was a period of time where people just kind of went, okay.
Yeah, I think Elon Musk's point about like humans need something to dream about, to reach for, something beyond us that requires us to reach. And that's why he's so obsessed with getting to Mars, because he just thinks that having that final frontier is necessary for our mental health, which which is funny because for years I had heard it like, oh, he's going to say he wants to make us a two-planet species, so the risk of extinction gets lower, and that's a part of it. I just had never heard until recently that at that point that like it was to him, it's like it's a philosophical and emotional need that we have because we've explored everything on this planet. There's nothing left, and and we're gonna go crazy if we don't find something new. And I thought that's pretty interesting.
I think we may have already gone crazy.
Pretty much. I mean, pretty much. I think it's why we love playing video games like Skyrim and Fallout. It's like suddenly there's a frontier again. You know, I think that there's a strong element. I think we naturally need a frontier. It's just something about how we're wired. You know, as Agent Smith would put it, we spread to another area, we multiply. But we need a new Shackleton. What is Shackleton, Ultimate Kahuna?
Oh, Ernest Shackleton.
Who's Ernest Shackleton? The captain you have me at a disadvantage.
He's the captain of the Endurance, the ship that went all the way down to the South Pole, then got ice jammed. The whole crew ended up surviving, but they were like gone for over 2 years.
Was this the story that the Terror was based on?
No, so the Terror's like 70, 80 years before. That's about the attempt of the Franklin expedition to find the Northwest Passage in the North Pole. It did not end well. See, the difference is where Shackleton had a happy ending, and everybody, minus the sled dogs, who unfortunately they did not make it. Everybody in terms of humans survived the entire trip and being stranded out on the ice for 2 years, and people claim Shackleton's leadership is what saved them. It's one of the best stories of human endurance that you can ever read about. The Franklin expedition is one of the darkest stories about human failure you can ever hear about. Also, actually watching this made me think a lot of the Terror, especially the intro, and I don't know why, because I know Shogun and the Terror are two very different shows with very different things, but I think it comes down to how well they've treated the historical set dressing thus far. It's not done in a cheap, what you would expect from television, where it's like, it's this time period. Throw these clothes on, sir. These are 50 years removed. Don't matter. No, but I'm wondering if some of the people involved in the Terror are working on this show, because a lot of the set designing and even the FX, even the cinematography, a lot of it similar. Actually, AMC, I believe, is actually who did the Terror, but I'm wondering if there's individuals that, because they bounce.
Was that AMC? I thought. Okay.
No, I think Terror was AMC. Let me double check. Then they got weird inside. They want to make a second season, which I don't know why.
Yeah, that second season lost me, and like the first episode was so insanely boring. I was like, who cares? But I read the book, The Terror. By the way, one of the best books I have ever read. I mean, I could not put it down. It is an absolutely incredible book. It's just fantastic. Now, the show, to my amazement, was pretty damn good. Like the show, The Terror, it's just a 1-season event kind of show. They did make a second season, but it sucks. I didn't like it.
It has nothing to do with the first. They tried to do an anthology, which actually, when I heard that, I'm like, oh, they're going to do anthology historical horror. That's great. And I've heard them go, we're going to do the second season in Japanese internment camp. And I'm like, okay, that's an interesting setting. I don't know if this is really conducive with the horror you're trying to do. And then,
Yeah, the second season is basically just a bunch of woke hand-wringing about the internment of Japanese, which was terrible, of course, but of course they never miss an opportunity to just turn the entire story into just a cultural guilt trip. And it's like, I'm fine with the story dealing with, with those issues, but the story has to come first, and the way I see it is it's just typical. It's identity politics crap is basically what the second season is. Now, the first season is based on the book, and there was one scene in particular in the show that I was waiting for, because when I read it in the book, it was one of the most just electrifying scenes I've ever read in a book, because it's basically they're out on the ice. These sailors are out on the ice, and they're in this tent, and this massive electrical storm happens. and one of them looks out the flap of the tent and sees this creature moving on the ice that is way bigger than a polar bear, and he's like, what the hell is that? And just the way the imagery was described in the book, it gives me chills thinking about it right now. It was so haunting and so vivid. I thought, that's the kind of thing like Mirkwood in The Hobbit. It's the type of thing that does not translate to film very well. And to my surprise, I mean, the book experience is still better, but like the show recreated that moment in the story pretty remarkably and managed to preserve a lot of the fear and the tension of like, what is this creature? Because there is a supernatural element. It's not a strictly historical telling. They basically suggest that there is this supernatural beast that is preying on these trapped sailors. And it's fantastic. It's in the best traditions of like an alien film or something. It's fantastic.
I will say History Buffs kind of ruined the whole creature, because he boiled it down to, oh look, it's Man Bear Pig and the Arctic. See? And then he did a wonderful.
It's a little better than Man Bear Pig. Half.
Well,
man,
yeah, but
half
he did a wonderful edit where it was the South Park Al Gore, but he superimposed the mini series onto the television. And he would keep freeze framing half man, half bear, half pig, and it was just like, oh, that was too good of an edit.
I did love how South Park, because I remember years ago when they had the episode with Al Gore, and he's like talking about Man Bear Pig, and that was the big joke. And of course, my favorite joke in that was that Al Gore would call Stan at 2 a.m, be like, "Hey Stan, it's me." It's like, yes, I know who it is. He's like, "It's Al Gore." I was vice president. It's like, yes, I know that you were vice president. So I love that. Anyway. So then, like, later, a few years later, they do Imagination Land, where the boys go to Imagination Land, where anything that has been imagined lives in Imagination Land, and they just happen to stumble on Man Bear Pig. So you're seeing what Man Bear Pig was in Al Gore's imagination, and he's this terrifying beast, and he's just tearing people limb from limb. You're like, oh my God, it really is terrifying. I thought that was fantastic. And then they ruined it by making Man Bear Pig actually real in later seasons, but whatever.
It's a long story. It's a long story.
Let's see. What Tom says, I also read it back in the day. Don't remember much, though. Talking about the Terror, Tom? If you're talking about the Terror, I mean, fantastic. Ultimate Kahuna asks, have you boys played Helldivers 2? I have not had the pleasure, but I am.
Isn't it the video game that turns you into a fascist, according to part of Twitter?
Yeah, anyone who loves freedom is a fascist, according to Twitter. But no,
my friend, before he went on, he sent me a joke about Helldivers 2, and I'm like, who would have thought that this puny little video game would rear the ugly head of the Starship Troopers debate all over again? What?
Yeah, like for example, if you believe that voters in Colorado should be able to decide who they want to vote for president, you're a fascist.
Yep.
And you hate democracy.
Yep.
So anyway,
the MSM told me to.
That would be them. But it seems like Helldivers 2 is kind of a knockoff of the Starship Troopers world, which is quite possible. And if so, I'm here for it because I love Starship Troopers. I love that movie. Yeah, I think a lot of people associate patriotism with fascism, and I think that's erroneous. And I think there's definitely such a thing as blind patriotism, but I think there's also such a thing as like, what are you going to do? It's us or the bugs, man. We don't have a choice. We don't have a choice, you know. But it's so funny. It's the same crowd that I hate all that patriotic propaganda. I hate seeing, too much of the flag everywhere. It's like, but that side loves flags. They love flags. They just don't like the American flag. But they love flags.
This is
and
true.
They love propaganda, and they love anything and everything that carries their message. Like, so it's hilarious to me that that's the crowd that hates.
I mean, they're rivaling me for being a vexiologist. So
what's a vexiologist? Is that someone who's always vexed?
No, that is actually the technical term. So vexiology is actually the technical term for the study of flags. Why vexiology? Really? I do not know.
I did not know that.
No, that is the honest truth.
Nice.
But I wouldn't truthfully call myself a vexiologist because I'm interested in flags, but then there's people who study it for on the next level. And I'm like, well, I just like the pretty colors, man. I like the pretty colors.
Yeah, pretty. That's right, red, white, and blue.
Yeah, those are the pretty ones.
Tom says Shogun. Okay, so you were talking about
Shogun.
Shogun as the book you've read. You just don't remember much. Yeah, you're gonna, dude, dive into Shogun, man. The show is fantastic. I hate that I have to give money to Hulu for it, though. I really do hate that because that goes to Disney.
Combine the two of us, it's $40 for the next 2 months going to them.
Really, I like to think though that it's not enough to just not reward bad content. We got to reward
I agree.
good content.
It is one of them. Hey, if you make something I like, here, take my money. This is what I want. If you make something I don't like, then you're not getting my money.
It's
funny how that works.
There's a troubling trend with this though, because I think about you've got One Piece, you've got Blue Eye Samurai, you've got Shogun. You basically anything that's been good in the last couple of years is based on an established source material, and it was faithfully adapted from that source material. And almost anything that is totally new these days is absolute crap. Or if it's not based on a source material and the original authors or writers do not have control, it's crap. Like I can't even believe how awful that Avatar: The Last Airbender live action is.
Oh, don't worry. No, it was so good. They're making 2 more seasons.
It's unbelievable. This never, God, one of my favorite shows that probably there's a lot of Trekkies that would skewer me for this, but I don't care. I love it. I love Enterprise. I loved Star Trek Enterprise. Now, that's not to say it was perfect in the beginning. It definitely had some pretty meh episodes in the beginning, but it started to get really good in the 3rd and 4th season. And which is kind of true of all Star Trek shows, frankly. They find their footing, right? And they had such great plans. The ratings were going up on that show, but it was kind of at the tail end of that era when if you did not have good ratings, you got canceled. And so even though the ratings were going in the right direction, the fan base for that show was growing and the writing had gotten much better, everything, and they had great plans to do the Romulan War in the 5th season, they canceled it anyway because the network it was on, UPN, which is now defunct, was kind of going out of business, and that was that. Now, they just greenlight 3 seasons, and it doesn't matter if anyone watches it or not. They're just going to make more of it. It's like this is the worst timeline. It's just the worst. And we're going to get 1 good season of Shogun because that's really all there is because it's based on a novel, and we're not going to get like a multi-year journey, That's the thing that just kills me about the modern era. Everything fails upward now. It makes me sick.
I gotta be honest, Blue Eye Samurai, when that came out of nowhere for me. Because I was at the end of the year and I saw the trailer and it was like the next day or two, it was out like, oh, here's the whole series. And I'm like, where did this come from? Wait, hold on. You've been highly promoting all this schlock all year, Netflix. And then this you just put this out in the background. What the hell?
Yeah, exactly. And it was actually based on, I think, a graphic novel, if I'm not mistaken. And the authors of the graphic novel were involved with the making of the show, and it was brilliant.
Oh,
the
okay.
Ultimate Kahuna with $1.99 says 2 more seasons of Atla. Fudge. Atla. Okay.
Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Avatar. Oh my God, really?
Yeah, you gotta get used to that initials for that. Avatar's a rough because we can't just call it Avatar because James Cameron decided to mess that up for us.
Yeah, that's true. Well, thank you, Ultimate Kahuna. A salute to you, sir. Thank you for being here on a Wednesday, an unplanned Wednesday, just chatting. I just wanted to chop it up about Shogun, We so rarely get...
Chop it up. We like chopping up, like the limbs of all those peoples in that poor castle.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it's so great because I'm watching Shogun, and one of the things I love about it, okay, is there is so much to sink your mind into in the show because you're trying to guess what are the characters going to do. You're trying to guess how are they going to get out of this. There's so much fun in trying to piece together how Toranaga is going to play this Game of Thrones and win it. And it makes me think kind of also of like House of the Dragon, which, by the way, I am so excited for season 2 of that. And I recently rewatched the whole first season of House of the Dragon, right? And um, one of the most incredible things about that show was how it starts out with King Viserys, who is this kind of milk toast, kind of quibbling, never too sure of what to do, governed by committee king. And everyone kind of knows this about him. Everyone kind of considers him to be weak. And kind of the only thing holding the realm together is the promise that he will deliver a male heir who will keep things on the rails, but he hasn't succeeded yet. He hasn't delivered this male heir. And one of the things that I love about the show, right, is I start out wanting to see Game of Thrones action, and I was a little bit disappointed that I didn't get to actually see Daemon Targaryen cut the crab feeder in half. He kind of just goes into the cave and he comes out dragging the diagonally sliced upper torso of the crab feeder, which was glorious. But I wanted to see him. I wanted to see him cut that shit-eating little freaking crab feeder in half. I want to see it. But so I kind of came for that, but I stayed for what was really an impressive kind of refresher course on what good writing truly is. And good writing truly is when you are on the edge of your seat in a conversation. Like when you're in the edge of your seat at like a trial, or you're at the edge of your seat with what will their plan be, right? And the absolute fruition of this was how Viserys, he has this idea that he's going to keep the realm held together by naming his heir Rhaenyra. And at first you think he's just doing it to kind of, he's kind of given up on having a male heir. He kind of just wants to show his daughter that he really does love her. It's almost out of guilt that he's doing it. And then he gets a male heir, but he sticks to his guns and he's like, no, you are my heir, Rhaenyra. You are going to succeed me. And you realize that he really does mean it. And the years go by and like this growing power struggle starts to come to fruition. And you basically see Viserys get weaker and weaker. He has basically leprosy and he's getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And now he's on his deathbed. And Rhaenyra comes to the court and she is about to be essentially thrown out of the line of succession by her rival, Alicent. And there's this great moment when Rhaenyra comes to her father's deathbed and she's like, and he's in excruciating pain every night at this point. He's kind of out of his mind because he's on, milk of the poppy. And she just says, Father, I need you. If you really want me to do this, if you really want me to be your heir, I need you to fight for me. I need you to fight for my family. And she kind of says it in a sort of desperation, knowing that he can't. And she kind of just cries in a little bit of just giving up. And then she leaves. And she pretty much knows he's not going to do anything. There's this sense that she doesn't even think he heard her. Like he's kind of like half asleep and he's on milk of the poppy. And she's like, I'm wasting my time. And the next day they're at court and they're going through the proceedings. And then suddenly the doors fly open and there's King Viserys barely able to walk in excruciating pain. And he's got like a mask hiding how half of his face has been eaten away by this disease. And they're like, King Viserys, first of his name, ruler of the first men. And, it's just the whole thing. And he's like, and the music is fantastic. And he's just inching across that floor to save his daughter's life. And I'm thinking now, the fact that was more stunning and exciting and edge of your seat than like a duel with swords was so impressive to me. And it was because of how many little events on the way to that about him specifically surprised me. First the surprise that he really does care. He really does want Rhaenyra to succeed him. Then the surprise that he actually does have a kind of quiet strength that people don't give him credit for. And then the surprise that he really did hear her and he is going to fight for her. It's like the fact that he's got one more day of being king in him. And then one even further surprise, which is he asks for a dinner with all of his family gathered around, his sons, his grandsons, and everybody. And he actually, for a moment, does manage to knit together these two political rivals, Alicent and Rhaenyra, he gets them to actually kind of forgive each other and start talking again, which, purely out of sentimentality, which in the Game of Thrones is impossible. That's impossible. It's impossible for them to ever be friends again because they know that whoever of them wins the Game of Thrones will kill the other, and so they can't trust each other. But somehow Viserys is able to get them to trust each other again.
Would you say, Hark, that he is stunning and brave?
He is. He's very stunning. So stunning, so brave. But my point is, that whole meme of stunning and brave is that it's the difference between earning it and not earning it, right? And so, of course, something he accidentally says in his poppy-addled state later to Alicent just unravels all of that work he just did, and it starts the whole thing in motion again. So that's the great tragedy of it. But up to that point, he had basically succeeded in doing this impossible feat that nobody would have thought was possible. And it becomes his last act on Earth. And I just find that so brilliant. So my point is, what is amazing to me about that show and Shogun and other shows is like when they're well written, so much of the drama, so much of the intensity, so much of the edge of your seat suspense doesn't actually come from the swords lopping heads off, although that's great. And that can be the most riveting scene in the show, but it comes from that element of like you don't know what's going to happen next, and it's not because you're necessarily afraid a character's going to die. That's the George R. R. Martin way of doing it, but I don't think it has to be that way. It's the question of how will this character overcome this challenge? Can they overcome this challenge? And there's so much fun in seeing them do that. There's so much fun in that surprise of like when those characters surprise you. And that can only happen when you have complex, layered, nuanced characters that have multiple angles to their personality. They're not always going to do one thing in one situation. Different, this is why characters like the live action Ahsoka is so vapid, for example, because she doesn't have those multiple dimensions. There's never a question of will she or won't she in a situation because she's just going to do whatever the plot requires of her. So
can we also mention that Blackthorn is a legit effing pilot compared to live action Hera?
Yeah, there's another great element to highlight here. Yeah, he's a pilot who is dressed to pilot because he loves to pilot.
He's a good pilot. He proves it.
He is. He's a great pilot. But and that brings up the other thing that's great about this show. Like take any really good show, Battlestar Galactica, Breaking Bad, House of the Dragon. One thing you will notice is that characters that sort of they have something they're good at, right? There are things that they are really good at, and there's things they're really bad at. The things they're really good at, you get to see them just earning it. You get to see and you also, that's where a lot of the fun in games, the promise of the premise, that's where the promise of the premise comes from. It comes from the characters doing what they do well. Right. And that is something that you see brilliantly in Shogun because, for example, Toranaga is very, very good at like court strategy. Blackthorn, he's not a soldier. He's not actually, how is he going to be able to train Toranaga's men? I don't know. That's part of the fun of the suspense of the next episode. But he is a really good navigator. He's a really good sailor. And so that scene where he kind of just brazenly decides to run the blockade, even though he has no realistic chance of surviving. And he's actually, the few Japanese words that he's learned, he's shouting them at the rowers, row faster, row faster. And he's doing this daring feat of seamanship to escape this blockade. It's great fun to watch because what are we watching? We're watching a character do what he was born to do. And that's one of the reasons why Breaking Bad is such a great show, because Hank Schrader is really good at finding drug dealers. Walter White is really good at cooking meth. Jesse Pinkman is really good at kind of sussing out how to win in the streets. And watching them succeed and fail in those tasks is what drives a lot of the fun of the show. And like you take House of the Dragon, Daemon Targaryen, he is a loose cannon, but he is really damn good at like, you know, bludgeoning his way through things. He is the warrior. Like he is very good at um how can I put this exactly? Because he's not the best player of political strategy because he's such a passionate character. He kind of he just fires off wherever his passions guide him. But he has this kind of like he has a total lack of naivete. You know, that's like even where Viserys or Rhaenyra or Alicent are kind of naive about what they're really up against, he never is. Like he totally understands what the absolute naked truth of the Game of Thrones. And that's kind of his strength in the show. And so seeing him in a situation like one of my favorite moments with Daemon is when they're having that argument over succession of Rhaenyra and Viserys is listening to Corlys's brother basically imply that her sons are bastards. And then Daemon has that great moment where he says, "Say it." You know, he's like, "Say it," you know, because he knows that like we're dancing around what's really at issue here. This guy desperately wants to accuse my wife of being the mother of bastards, and I'm not going to let him slither out of this room without saying it. And it's like that's Daemon's brilliance in the story, and so that's what I think is the defining characteristic with a really good prestige TV show like Shogun or House of the Dragon is the characters have things they are just excellent at, and you get to watch them go up against other characters who are also excellent at what they do. And that's where the fun comes from. And the problem with Ahsoka live action, just to give a sort of counterpoint to what I'm talking about, you could have had that. You really could have had that if you had a really well-drawn character with Ahsoka and if you actually had something to Balon and if you actually had something to Admiral Thrawn, it could have been excellent.
Quick change.
She had quick change, yes. Because the problem with Thrawn is Thrawn was supposed to be that kind of character. He was supposed to be this kind of really interesting chess-playing character, which is very excellent for the Star Wars universe because it plays against type. Also, you know, frankly, it's why in The Force Awakens, I initially liked General Hux. I thought he was kind of the most interesting bad guy in the sort of First Order because he didn't have the Force. He was kind of at the mercy of Kylo Ren, but he also clearly had smart political instincts, and he also was he was the master of the army. Like he had the army and was running the army in the way that Grand Moff Tarkin was. And he seemed like a dyed-in-the-wool ideologue, and all of that was interesting. Now, what I didn't know at the time was this was all mystery box bullshit that was never going to go anywhere. But when I didn't yet know that, I was intrigued by like, oh, what is his ideology?
It's been almost 10 years.
Yeah, like how
lots changed.
Yeah, and then of course, Rian Johnson did what he did and turned Hux into a laughingstock, idiot, incompetent boob, which is not what he was in the first movie, right? He totally changed his character.
Imagine, if you will, that you're setting up a trilogy, but instead of you having control over that trilogy and making sure that it reaches a finality that makes sense, you decide to set everything up, then walk away and act all surprised when it goes to crap. And to be fair, I'm not defending J.J. Abrams, or Jar Jar Abrams, we like to call him now, because when he came back to try to fix it, he just made what was a bad explosion turn into a nuclear bomb.
Yeah. I actually, you know, I came to the realization of how bad Force Awakens is in total retrospect because the problems I sniffed out in the beginning were like I do remember rolling my eyes when Starkiller Base just killed all those planets, and I was like, well, was that Coruscant? Like all 5? Like how could you take out 5 planets in the same system that were all inhabited? Like there was just so many questions that would never be answered. But my point is, what is clear with this show is that we have characters that are excellent at what they do up against other characters that are excellent at what they do, and you have multiple factions vying for power. It's great fun to watch, and you don't exactly know what's going to happen. as Ultimate Kahuna puts it, Blackthorn is on the edge of a knife at all times. Pretty much literally. He's on the edge of a knife pretty much at all times. But what I do love about Blackthorn, and this is why the girl boss, the Mary Sue girl boss that the Wokies love, fails as a character, because unlike her, he is blundering into these situations and acting like an ass, but he's getting his ass kicked, and now he's starting to learn from his mistakes. And you cannot underestimate how much fun that is for an audience to watch. It doesn't matter if it's a male or a female character. Watching a character fall flat on their face and then learn from their mistakes is one of the most fun experiences I think any audience has in a movie or a TV show. I'm trying to think of like some examples of this, because like there are so many great examples of characters that kind of get their ass kicked and then they start to figure it out and they start to like really learn from their mistakes, and you see them start to really shine. I don't know why this movie is coming to mind, because it's not the best example, but like the movie Castaway, I thought of one. This is one I love this movie a heck of a lot. The Edge with Anthony Hopkins and Alec Baldwin. It's an old movie, but like they get lost in the Alaskan wilderness and they have to survive. And he's this kind of eccentric billionaire. Anthony Hopkins is. He's an eccentric billionaire who kind of has all this book knowledge, and Alec Baldwin plays this scheming, one of his kind of scheming, shall we say, right-hand men, and has no survival knowledge at all. And so you've got this guy with all this book smarts, but no actual practical survival knowledge, and they're trying to survive a bear hunting them and all this shit going down. And what's great about it is you watch these characters figure things out, So I love that. What else have we got? And Wrangler plugging the captain's book, Blood and Oak, not Aoak. Oak. Thanks,
No,
Wrangler.
I
appreciate that.
Well, when he posted that was right when we were talking about these assassins storming Osaka Castle. So I'm like, no, Blood and Oak. That's perfect. That's perfect. It describes perfectly that scene.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Ultimate Kahuna says he's the kind of character that would be Viserys, I think you mean, who showcases a good man but a bad king. Yeah, exactly. It's exactly a great point, Kahuna. So I love Viserys. He became, I find that I have a real soft spot for flawed characters. I really do. I have a soft spot for flawed characters who pay a high price for their flaws. And that's probably why Boromir in Lord of the Rings is one of my favorite characters, because, Aragorn is just a great, amazing character also. But like Aragorn is the paragon, man. He always makes the right decision. He's tempted by the ring, but he refuses it right out the gate. Frodo even offers it to him, and you can see he's tempted and he won't take it. Boromir, on the other hand, is more like most of us, which is, he's like, if you would but lend me the ring, and it all makes sense in his head. It's for good, you see. It's to save Gondor. Gondor is the one standing in the breach. If it weren't for Gondor, you'd all be slaves by now. And it's like, and you get that amazing, you see his great heroism as a man fail in that moment, because he's not able to resist the temptation. He's not able to resist this power. And but then he redeems himself in the end. It's like, I have such a soft spot for characters
Mortimer's
like that.
Mortimer's sacrifice in the first movie, well, in the book as well, is one of my favorite moments of Lord of the Rings, of the trilogy, of the whole thing, just because of the whole, he effed up big time, and now he's going to have to repent, essentially. And it's one of my best parts. It's one of my favorite parts of Lord of the Rings.
Actually, I have to say, I have a lot of problems with it, but season 4 of Stranger Things actually does a really good job with Eleven having to sort of confront her past, and she's lost her powers and she has to gain them back. And at first, she basically has to subject herself once again to Dr. Brenner's abuse in order to become the superhero again. And that whole run of episodes is really harrowing for her character, because there's multiple points where she wants to give up. There's multiple points where she wants to escape. And, she kind of hates Brenner. At the same time, she kind of feels this childish pull towards him because he was the only father figure she knew. It's excellent character work, and it's because she's having to fight through that suck. She's having to fight through that hardship that makes it so satisfying as a viewer to see her succeed. And that's what you don't get with bad storytelling. So in any case, I am loving to have something good to follow. Ultimate Kahuna says, tears every time I would have followed you, my brother, my captain, my king. Oh, to the very end. Oh, to the very end. I love that scene so much. Yes, when Boromir is dying, and what did Aragorn say back to him? Because Aragorn kind of gives him his blessing in that moment. I'm trying to remember what he said. I need to rewatch it. It's been too long because I used to know some of those lines by heart.
Last time I saw anything from Fellowship of the Ring, it was segments at my hotel room a few months back. The last time I fully sat down, it's been years.
He says he says something like, don't. I think Boromir says something to Aragorn to the effect of "save my people," and then Aragorn says, I will not. I swear to you, with whatever strength is left in me, I will not let our people fall, nor the white tree fall. And that's the last thing Boromir hears before he dies. It's like, oh, that's so... He hears who Aragorn has been refusing. He's been refusing his birthright as a Gondorian up until that point. And now, in Boromir's final moments, he's saying, no, it's our people. We're in this together. And I promise you, I won't let this be in vain. It's like, oh, that's fantastic. I will not let our people fail, says Ultimate Kahuna. Yes. So brilliant. Which... yeah, it's like, dang, I just had in my mind another great scene from a iconic film that I wanted to mention, because he says, oh no, it's not a film. There was a great episode. Maybe this is super random, but let's just roll with it. The series Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
I can roll with random.
Yeah, like Odo, who is, if you don't know Star Trek lore, you're going to be a bit lost here, but I'll do my best. But I think this crowd probably does. They're in the middle of the Dominion War. Weyoun, who is basically the leader of the Dominion forces, is trying to defect. He's trying to defect to the Federation, and it's because the founders, the changelings, Odo's species, have been infected with a disease. But he doesn't tell Odo this. And it's just this great episode where Odo goes to pick him up and bring him back to the Federation. But they're being hunted by Dominion forces. But because Odo is kind of considered one of them, it's a kind of political standoff because the Dominion can't kill a founder. It's all that. Well, there's this great thing. There's this great running through line of the whole episode of where Weyoun, his species have been genetically engineered and conditioned to see all of Odo's species as gods, literal living gods. And so he keeps fawning over Odo and saying, like, it's such an honor to be in the presence of a god. And Odo doesn't think of himself that way. And he's constantly hand-waving. It's like, I'm not a god. I'm just a security officer, and I'm bringing you to the Federation, and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the episode, Weyoun sacrifices his life to save Odo. He basically kills himself. And he's lying in Odo's arms, dying a painful death. And he looks up into Odo's eyes, and he says, "Founder, please, he says, Odo, just give me your blessing, And Odo's like, I can't, it's not, I don't believe in that. And he says, please, Odo, just tell me I've served you well. Tell me I haven't failed you. And I love how Odo just kind of gives in that moment and says, you have served me well, and you have my blessing. And Jeffrey Combs, he's basically one of my favorite villains in all of Deep Space Nine, quite frankly, playing Weyoun brilliantly in that scene, just has this look of peace in his eyes, and then he dies, and it was like, it's unbelievably awesome. It's one of the best moments in the series, I think. Because Odo he's the stick in the mud. He never gives an inch, but in that moment, and he's fighting his own people, which is so doubly, he's basically looking into the eyes of this war criminal that he opposes, but he also has this connection to him because his species, uplifted them into like sentient beings, and so he feels an almost kind of responsibility to him in this weird way, and it's just great. It's just fantastic on so many levels. I don't know why Boromir made me think of that, but it just made me think of that, of like a brilliant moment where this character kind of redeems another character in a sense. So, Ultimate Kahuna says, how do you write dialogue like that and have it be that fulfilling? And that's a great question. I'm not sure it's one I can answer because Tolkien is just flat out one of the greatest writers of all time. He just is. All I can say is my best theory on that, and all that I've learned, is I believe that true art comes from a place of listening, not speaking. And I know that sounds counterintuitive because obviously you have to write, you have to speak, you have to perform, but I consider that the product of the listening. Eckhart Tolle, author of A New Earth and The Power of Now, which I think are great books for anyone to read, but especially if you're an artist, talks about how creation comes from a place of silence. And it comes from, the universe. It comes from another place, God, if you like. So I guess what I'm saying is I think that true creative instinct, we all have it in some way or another, and it comes from another place. Now, putting it into words, I think that's the work of the mind and craftsmanship and all of that. But I think that, if you say, I'm going to tell a story about marginalized people, and it's going to portray them as stunning and brave. You're going to write garbage dialogue, and you're going to write a bunch of bullshit that nobody wants to hear, and there's going to be literally no profundity anywhere to be found in that. Why? Because that comes from a place of lecturing and speaking and narcissism and self-obsession. It comes from, in other words, the mind. And our minds are driven by the ego. And the ego doesn't see anything but the ego objectifies everything around it because the ego sees things to be gained, things to be lost. The ego sees things denied, things attained. But it's the soul and the spirit that sees the natural beauty in all of the universe. And I think that an author like Tolkien or Shakespeare or any of the greats, they are listening and looking for the beauty in the universe. And they are acting as a conduit that is bringing that forth into the world. And it's not something it's not guaranteed you'll succeed at doing that. But I just think Tolkien was tapping into his love of natural beauty, the wilderness, the wilds, the forest. He was tapping into his spiritual beliefs. He was tapping into just the rich annals of European history, English history, and he was tapping into very real human experiences down through the ages. And we all carry a share of that consciousness in us. And you can only get at that, in my view, by listening for it. And that's a hell of a hard thing to do because the ego wants to take credit for all of that. The ego wants to say, look at how brilliant I am. Look at all the amazing, pretty words I wrote. And it's like, but that's actually not from the ego. The ego didn't write that, if it's good, I think. So that's kind of a long way of saying that's kind of how I think he gets at it. It's you got to dig deep. You got to find the truth. In a strictly technical sense, you also got to have great, rich, detailed characters. I mean, Tolkien wrote characters that had lineages and histories and all kinds of lore. I mean, his characters were, for all intents and purposes, real people. That's how you get lines that amazing because these are real. These are real people that you're hearing speak to each other. So.
And if I can interject, guys,
yeah, please do.
It's not that hard to find something person interesting. Any history you delve into, real world history, is going to go down a deep rabbit hole. No matter what you're researching. So all these people, you always have these people when they make fictional worlds and fictional characters, and you go, how do they do it? How are they able to go so rich? Typically, they're being inspired by a lot of real world elements, real world people It could even just be a little nugget, and then they unravel that nugget, and then that's how they're able to spin off into a fictional element. So history is very important to study. If you want to get into good world building, it's important to have an awareness of real world history and real world facets about certain cultures and elements.
Yeah.
It'll be a good inspiration for what you're trying to create. And then even if you're doing something in outer space, another dimension with all these starships and all these planetary, if you start doing a little digging with some real life event, you're probably going to find something. Oh, I really like this conflict that happened in this real event. It's very interesting. What if I apply it in this setting now?
Yeah, I mean, George R. R. Martin basically took a lot of inspiration from the War of the Roses, which was between the Lancasters and the Yorks, right? Which became the Lannisters and the Starks, and that's kind of. But kind of one thing that you hit upon there is I think you have to find passion. You have to find true passion because. Take the example of Godzilla -1. You know, I'm watching this film, and the first time I watched it, that third act was such a surprise to me because I'm used to Godzilla and the humans in the Godzilla story kind of just being there to bear witness to him, and it's rare that they have. I mean, the original Godzilla film did have a pretty good story with the humans, but still. They were more like the teenagers in a slasher film that are trying not to get eaten in previous Godzilla entries. This was the first Godzilla film where there's this central protagonist and he's on this journey. And I did not expect this kind of mano-y-mano battle royale between him in the Shinden Plain versus Godzilla. And what struck me was when they rebuild the plane, when they're talking about the plane, and then that probably my favorite moment in the whole film, quite frankly, is when he's first in the plane, he's ready, he's about to face his fate as a man, he's got the picture of his family on the cockpit, you know, and he's testing its abilities, and he's reveling in what this amazing plane can do, this plane that was never used in the war. And I just remember thinking like, oh man, the director, the writer of this film loves that plane. The way that I love a tall ship, the way that I love the Enterprise or the Norman, the way that any of us loves a ship or a car or just something we're passionate about, like I can just tell that this film loves this plane. And it's just luxuriating in this plane and how awesome it is. And then it come to find out the plane looks like something out of fiction. The Shinden is real. That was a real plane that never made it into the war.
Two mock-ups do exist. Well, did exist.
You can go to Japan and see it in a museum. In fact, Yamazaki, the director, used the real plane, some real models from, like, I think he borrowed some stuff from the museum to actually make the film. So my point is, part of what makes that film so great and makes it connect with you on such a emotional, raw level is because the writer and director of the film himself loves military history. He loves that plane. He has a true love and a passion for it, and that comes through in the film. And so, you know, Tolkien, how is Tolkien able to write such great stories? Well, it comes from a place of love. You know, true art comes from a place of love and passion. And if you're digging into the history, you're going to find something you're passionate about, or digging into whatever subject it is, you're going to find the thing that you love. And it's that, and that is actually that's not coming from the ego. That's my point. Like, that's coming from a deeper spiritual place that we all share in common. And that's what makes it connect. That's so to speak, a bottom-up approach to storytelling. It's a bottom-up approach. It's like, I'm going to find the love first. Then I'll worry about who the character is. Then I'll worry about what ship they're on. Then I'll worry about who the aliens they're going to meet are. But first I got to find that love. That's that burning passion that's in me. And I think that the opposite of that is the propaganda model, which is top-down storytelling. I got to find the right message and the right identities for all the characters in this film, and I got to make sure that everything is exactly as it's supposed to be, and then I'll find the story. And it's like, well, that's not coming from a place of love. That's coming from a place of often bitterness and resentment.
Yeah.
But in its most benign forms, it's coming from a place of pure intellectual egotism. And that's why it results in hollow characters, not very interesting. I mean, I think Ahsoka live action was a total exercise in Dave Filoni egotistical self masturbation. Like he was basically just porting his cartoon characters into live action without any regard for whether they worked well as an ensemble cast, whether they had any depth or layers, whether there was actually a meaningful story there, whether there was any sense of forward momentum in the greater lore of Star Wars. I mean, none of that factored into it. It was just, it's Anakin. Anakin is in it. And he's alive now. And that was exactly the feeling I had. And I don't say that from a high horse, because I have made this mistake. Like when I was in my youth, my tender, when I was a young lieutenant, just coming up through the ranks, I was very egotistical in my writing style. I mean, it was all about the intellectualism of it. It was all about, like, is this crafted well? And that led to me learning a lot of great writing techniques, and I think that was helpful. But it wasn't until later that I kind of came to realize that actually that's not really where the best work comes from. It kind of just comes from a place you can't explain. You know, it's like the best things I've written, I'd never planned on writing. And some of the most crap, the crap I had to delete was the stuff I just mentally thought was the best thing ever. I was just like, oh, I had it in my mind for months and months and months, and I wrote it and thought it was the most genius thing ever, and then someone else reads it and they're just like, what the hell? You know? And so it's like, so it's just fascinating how, like, you've got to find the love in that place of truth before you can even think about putting anything. Well, I mean, I don't want to say don't start writing, but I mean, you've got to find the truth and the love for the subject or the character or whatever it is. What do you think, Redoubt? Think I'm onto something?
Yeah, just maybe a tiny little speck you're onto something on some type of plant that'll become a tree, or I don't know what that allegory was. You know what? I'm just gonna stop right now. I don't do words too well.
Just a bunch of bullshit. It's probably just a bunch of pseudo-philosophical bullshit.
Hey, it sounded. It sounded better than what's in feeders nowadays.
It sounds good. Hey, you know, I don't know. I believe it. The interesting thing is, whenever I've been stuck in my writing, like, that's usually what I would do, is I would go back to, okay, let's dig into the history. Let's go find something that's just too intriguing to ignore, you know? And that's usually where I found it. But Wrangler here says, my favorite character that Jeffrey Combs played in Star Trek was Shran in Enterprise. And Shran the Andorian commander is a great character, and sort of he's an excellent kind of buddy character for Archer later in the show. However, I must disagree with you, Wrangler. Weyoun is just simply, bar none, the greatest character Jeffrey Combs played. He's one of the greatest characters in all of Star Trek for me. He really is. I love Weyoun. Whenever he's on, he's so oily. He is so slimy, but he's also so brilliant. He's also so clever as a diplomat. He's got, like, these tactical command, but he's so arrogant. He's got this hubris that gets him into trouble and literally gets his neck snapped, you know, but when he mouths off to Worf, which was great. So, like, he's just a great character. I like what he represents. He represents how the Dominion will offer you something, you know, juicy, something that you want in one hand while they're hiding a dagger behind their back. Like, that's what he represents to me. And I really love that. I really love that dynamic of the character. And I think he's what sold the Dominion. He's what sold the Dominion as a political power, a military command structure, and, like, this threat that could actually conquer the Federation. So there you go. Just my 2 cents. Can you tell it? Of course, that's not to diminish Ducat, because Ducat is also fantastic. Wrangler says, he was all those things, yes, but he just pissed me off every time. That's the point. He's supposed to piss you off, Wrangler. Like one of the best parts is when Cisco is welcoming him aboard, and it's like after they took back the station from the Dominion, and now they're doing some negotiations, and Weyoun comes out of the airlock. He's like, Captain, it's been so long since we've been together. He's like, how wonderful that we're all together again. And then, like, I love how Captain Cisco is having none of it. And he's just like, let me be frank, Mr. Wayoon. He's like, we are not friends. I don't like you, I don't like the Dominion, and I don't like what it stands for. So spare me your fake compliments, something like that. And he's like, well, Captain, I like you, and I like being here on your station. It's like, oh, give it up, you worm. He's great. I love that about him. But yes, it pisses you off. Ultimate Kahuna says, oh yeah, Star Trek. Kami never measure up Star Wars, except jokes on all of us. They both suck now. Well, yes, they do. Although we did get one great season of Star Trek Picard from Terry Matalas, and I saw it on the shelves in the store. It was the complete series, and I'm like, no way I'm buying that, because even though I'd love to have the third season on physical media, I will not pay money for the first 2 seasons of Picard. So if I can't get it, the third season on its own in physical, I won't buy it.
I have heard it is a miracle that Star Trek was able to even get a send off like that.
Yeah, total fluke.
I've not seen any of Picard, and I don't plan to see the first 2 seasons ever.
Yeah, a friend of mine, I was telling him about season 3, and I remember telling him clearly, like, don't watch the first 2 seasons. Well, then he texts me and he's like, yeah, watching Picard, and I got to tell you, some of this sucks. I was like, oh, really? Well, I don't know. I guess I can see, they're definitely, it's not a perfect third season. I get what And then he's like, yeah, because like this whole thing with the Borg on the Stargazer and blah, blah is weird. I'm like, what? You're watching season 2. I'm like, no. Avoid. Nope. Like, skip season 2. It's complete garbage. It's absolute garbage.
You didn't read the warning on the label.
You didn't read what I said. I'm like, and then he started watching season 3, and he's like, he didn't think it was perfect, but he's like, oh, this is pretty good. There's some good stuff here. I'm like, I told you. Just pretend.
Hey, this resembles a show.
Yeah, okay. Picard season 2 is literally the worst Star Trek ever made. Like, ever. It's absolute. I can't even describe to you what absolute trash it is. I could do a whole stream on it. But in any case, I love Ultimate Kahuna's trying to get us Star Wars fans versus
Star
Trek fans.
Tommy never measure up Star Wars.
I see what you're up to, Kahuna. Look, it's not even a point. Like, there's not even a point. It's apples and oranges. Star Wars is, space wizards and fantasy. Star Trek is, grounded future of humanity. The end of Rebels season 3 was really good Star Wars storytelling. I can't well remember it. There was stuff I liked in Star Wars Rebels.
A few episodes of Rebels. I don't.
Yeah, I did like this. I did like the Vader episodes in Rebels. Because whenever Vader showed up, it was rare, first of all, and second of all, when he showed up, he was undefeatable. Like Kanan, Ezra, they all had to flee if he showed up. So that was well done, and I don't understand why Filoni can't, get there with live action. I don't know. I really do think his ego just got in the way. I really do. I think his ego unmanned him. That is my theory of why Filoni was so bad.
He bought into his own hype, and it backfired spectacularly.
Oh, come on, Wrangler. What are you talking about? You're just trolling now. You're trolling. But I did really like that final season they added for Clone Wars with Ahsoka. Some of it was kind of boring with the Mandalorian stuff, but I
liked the last 4 episodes.
Yeah, those last 4 episodes were killer. Those were awesome. However, I do understand, like, people say, like, Ahsoka should not be alive because she complicates things, and it's like, yeah, we have gotten to the point. Have you? Oh, I guess I've not seen that movie, Wrangler. I've not seen the movie Fanboys. But we've definitely gotten to that point where, like, in the 1986 Ahsoka, it's like the last Jedi is pursuing the last of the Jedis who are in a hunt for the last of the remaining Jedis. I know. Yeah. It's like, did anyone not survive Order 66 at this point? We've got so many damn Jedi that are running around the galaxy, just doing whatever. It's like, that's so, I went over the Battlestar Galactica Bible on the last Captain's Cast, and it just really drove it home to me. Like, they need to have a clear series Bible for something like Ahsoka
Yes,
or the MCU.
Yes. When you said that, yes, well, Sunday, I was even like, yes, you need structure. You need history to your characters and to your world.
Yeah, even just being able to talk about Ahsoka's childhood, which, I mean, yes, she grew up with the Jedi, but what about before that? You know, how did she, you know, there should be all that. And maybe it's there. I don't know. Maybe there is a Bible somewhere. I'm just telling you, I'd like to see it if there is one, because if it's any good,
I believe there would be one for the original Clone Wars series.
There would
I would
have
presume,
to be, I would think.
Just because it was its own separate thing, and like Lucas would have to have looked at it and been like, okay, this is good, you know, like I like what you're doing with this, but the live action stuff.
Oh, which reminds me, okay, there is something pretty funny I came across.
Oh boy.
Let's do a funny video, shall we? Just
I'm always for funny videos.
Yeah, we're just chilling, you know. We
pretty much by the way, wrapped
up our Shogun review.
Yeah. Shogun, go see it if you haven't. Keep following it. We're gonna keep following it. This is the best thing on television right now.
It really is. It's a pretty fantastic. Okay, here it is. Okay, I got it. This is Zack Snyder's Star Wars. This is Zack Snyder's Star Wars.
Oh no!
Gotta hang on, queuing it up.
Very high tech.
All right, share screen. So
there we are.
If Zack Snyder did A New Hope, this is what it would be like.
Oh no.
Hat tip oral
knots. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, there was a great war amongst the stars. In time,
gotta get that quiet.
It became known as the Star Wars.
Boyless slow-mo!
Dude, this is Rebel Moon to an absolute T.
Oh, dear Lord.
The music is so good.
Hard cut, look at his boots. Oh, God. We need some shaky cam too, I feel. And we need to be zooming in and out all over the.
Oh dear, R2. That was a harrowingly close escape. Once again, we find ourselves narrowly evading the clutches of the Empire. That vast and oppressive regime that seeks to control the galaxy. Their forces, under the command of Darth Vader, a former Jedi turned ruthless Sith
this is some heavy,
this
is some front loading right here.
The very embodiment of darkness and power.
Shoving it all down.
But we must press on, for the fate of the galaxy depends on the rebellion's success.
Just keep we need a freaking garbage truck. The dump the size of info that's being dumped on our parts right now.
I know, just raw exposition dumps. but the funny thing about this though is this is exactly how like every D+ series is. Like it just dumps raw. What was the thing I was watching? Well, actually, Madam Web was doing the same thing because that's the other thing about Shogun is like it's able to communicate with expressions and like subtle mannerisms and things like that through the acting, that there's more going on than you can see. But modern writers, they just info dump everything. And I think this is really what Denis Villeneuve is really upset about when he says that he hates dialogue, which is an asinine statement. What I think he's actually responding to is the fact that modern writers, this is how they write. They never let anything be left to discovery. the Mother Star.
Don't try to frighten us with your sorcerer's ways, Lord Vader. Your sad devotion to that ancient religion has not helped you conjure up the stolen data tapes, or given you clairvoyance enough to find the rebels' hidden fleet.
There's actually a scene in Rebel Moon where the bad guy's being tortured by another bad guy that's basically just like this. It's almost just like this. Just this over-the-top gothic music.
This bickering is pointless.
You're getting some idea here of why Rebel Moon is so excruciating to watch.
I didn't go see that because I value my time, and
This is dead on accurate. This is dead on accurate, like how Rebel Moon is. Oh, shit. Yeah, except there would be a super oversaturated gas giant in the background and a bunch of it looks like the image on a Trapper Keeper. All right, let's just skip ahead because I think we can. This is basically the whole video.
no matter where you drop, it'll just be slow-mo.
So there you go. I think I just skipped the video. Dang it! What did I just do? I think I just skipped. There it is.
Zack Snyder's movies, the thing. Yeah, the. I can't speak.
Oh wait, no, you got to see this. Hang on.
I have to see it.
I pulled it too soon. I pulled it too soon. Whoa.
Fumble a bag, now I will not fumble a bag.
Except it would be a girl,
Fumble
boss.
a bag, now I will not fumble a bag. Act like you know how this goes.
Dude, Zack Snyder does Star Wars.
There's no one on board, sir. According to the log, the crew abandoned ship right after takeoff.
I sense something. The presence I've not felt since. Once a brother in arms, now a shadow from the past.
Oh, God.
The Dulan Mustafa with my master Obi-Wan. It was not just a clash of lightsabers, but a battle of ideas. What we believed the Force represented. The lava's fiery rage around us mirrored the fury in our hearts.
Oh, shut up!
Swing, each parry, we weren't just fighting each other. We were fighting for the destiny we each believed in. Obi-Wan, the
I can
wise
see that. I don't
and
need you telling
steadfast
me.
guardian, believed in the old ways.
This is scary.
The
This is
Republic.
scary
I know.
accurate.
I, consumed by a newer, darker vision, sought to overthrow the shackles of the old order. That battle was more than a turning point in the galaxy. It was the final severing of a bond once thought unbreakable.
All the way back to Phantom Menace.
It was there, on the scorching banks of Mustafar, that Anakin Skywalker truly ceased to be. And I, Darth Vader, rose in his place. It happened again. on another planet years later.
Oh no! Oh no!
And something tells me it may yet happen again. Today.
Just maybe.
Dude, Obi-Wan is so bad. Like, that series is the worst thing they've ever done.
Notified?
Since
You
the
can't
last worst thing.
Yeah, you can't see any of the fighting in that show. I'm like, this is some of the worst cinematography and lighting I've ever seen.
But it also just shoots a hole through all the lore. It's so
But we know
stupid.
about that. That's the obvious parts. But I'm like, I'm avoiding the obvious argument. I'm just like, when I saw the images and that, and I'm like, I can't see anything. I can't see for anything. What? Who people got paid millions to make this?
Yeah, slow-mo running ultimate. Dude, the best part though is that, like, when Mahler was talking about it, he's like, if you look closely, there's a couple of action sequences in Rebel Moon, or as they call it, Rebel Moon, when she's in slow motion and they shoot at her and she goes into even slower motion. I'm like, I didn't even catch that. That's so bad. It goes, Ultimate Kahuna says, I'm waiting for the bad CGI object to fly at the screen for those big 3D theaters. I really like the Mother Star. That's pretty funny. The Mother Star.
I'll have to clear it.
Of course. I like how the music's all like new age. It's all like this, especially when it's Anakin versus Obi-Wan, it's this new age music. That's good.
Brain HQ is a brain training program with online exercises that target core cognitive skills, like...
No, this is really like a Zack Snyder movie with all the product.
Yeah, I know. I gotta reactivate my YouTube Premium. My bad.
No, it's like the ending of Man of Steel where they're just flying through everything. All the product placement they're flying through at the end of that movie.
Or like a giant pea from a Pepsi sign falling on the... Madam Web is one of the most gloriously stupid films ever made. It's it'd be fun. I can't wait to see where Madam Web ranks on my top 10 list of 2024. You know, I still would rather watch Madam Web than Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. There's almost no movie I would... I mean, I think you have to go almost all the way back to Neverending Story to find a movie I would want to watch less or less than Quantumania. Yes!
All the lightning bolts.
Oh, that's a nice one. Just these weird sound edits.
Lord Vader, you have failed me. The
rebels have escaped. You will find them and destroy them, or you will suffer pain worse than any pain you have imagined that pain can be.
The lightning, my god.
What are we doing here? What? The music is so good.
That's Zack Snyder for you. And to be fair, Zack Snyder's not the only director who does that nowadays. There's so many of them. He's just the most infamous.
There you go. That's for that hat tip oral knots. That AURALNAUTS. That's the YouTube. Same brilliant YouTubers that made the Ahsoka 1986 parody, which is
glorious.
You basically just watched. I would say you watched Rebel Moon combined with Zack Snyder Justice League, which I did. I actually liked. I liked the Snyder cut mostly, but yet he loves these kind of ridiculous, melodramatic. I mean, the sequence with the Flash in the Snyder cut is one of the most strange, slow, awful things in any Zack Snyder movie. So I love Watchmen. I think it's like one of my favorite films. But now I think about it, and it's like there are moments where the owl is landing, and it just has to go into slow motion, and it's like, or like when the Silk Spectre is doing a spin, and her hair's got to go slow motion through all the fire,
So I gotta just mention briefly of slow motion. One of my biggest pet peeves would come from pro wrestling, or actually I think all sports do it now, but it was pro wrestling the most. And I know pro wrestling's not real. Okay, when they would do slow motions. They would do this thing where like the middle portion would be slowed down and then they would just speed it up in the last third. And it's like, well, show it or don't show it. I think the reason they did it's because they don't want you to see that they're actually missing the mark. But at the same time, I'm like, then just show a different angle.
Well, in the case of Rebel Moon, I could tell you that the slow motion in that was absolutely to hide the fact that there was nothing interesting about the action scenes. There was actually no interesting choreography, and there certainly was nothing resembling like an interesting story to go with the action scene. Like I really am stunned by how bad Rebel Moon is. It really did shock me. I was like, that there's no story here. There's nothing, but so much exposition, but no story. How is that even possible? Like, how is this possible, Ultimate Goon? How is Ant-Man that bad that I would still rather watch Madam Web or Rebel Moon? I would rather watch Rebel Moon. I would rather watch The Marvels. Hell, I'd probably sit through Echo again rather than watch Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. That movie is so repulsive to me. Because Ultimate Kahuna, because it's a CGI volume-induced fever dream by one of the most idiotic writers in all of Hollywood. Which
from
is
the little
quite
I've
a bar.
seen, because I will never watch it. It's people standing on a platform and everything's green screen behind them and around them, and CGI is thrown in front of them.
I think the way I explained it is it represents to me all the things I bitch about, just all the things I bitch about in writing, CGI, whatever. Quantumania, it just dumb concepts, just ways to turn brilliant concepts into something stupid and banal. Like that literally, Quantumania exhibits all of it, just all of it. Like every level of it is something I hate the most in how modern movies are made. Like just one example, like the MCU humor is probably the worst in Quantumania. The jokes are so stupid and they just keep whacking you over the head with them over and over. Like the don't be a dick thing was so stupid. And then You've got the message, you've got all that, but also just take the idea of the quantum realm. You know, in the first film, it's this mysterious, Lovecraftian cosmic horror idea of like, what if you kept shrinking below the quantum level where time and space no longer had the same meaning? You'd be lost forever in a darkness you can't imagine. I'm like, dude, that's cool. That's a cool idea. I didn't expect these idiots to think you could show that. You can't show that. The whole point is it's beyond the realm of imagination. That was the whole idea. But even if you were going to show it, turning it into this Rick and Morty episode is the worst thing you could do. It just makes it something fake and banal and cartoonish. I hate it. I hate that. I hate the lack of creativity. You know what it is? I think I hate that they think we're so stupid. That's really what it is. Like, I watch a movie like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and I am meant to be laughing like an idiot when this green goo creature is basically giving the main characters red facials and then asking about how many holes they have. And I'm supposed to be doing something other than not crawling out of the theater in embarrassment that I'm even in this movie. And it insults me. It insults me, quite frankly, because I'm like, how stupid do you think your audience are? Clearly you think we eat as much paint chips as you do, Jeff Loveness. So that's why I hate it so much. But there you go. There's probably one person is like, I like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. I'm like, oh, well, you know, enjoy.
Hey, look, the captain got entertained from Madam Web, so...
I did, like, in the same way, not quite as much as, I mean, it's long. Like, if it had only been like 90 minutes, I think it would have been actually a pretty entertaining movie just because of how bad it is. But
I agree with
it's 2
Kahuna
hours,
where
man.
I'd watch The Happening. It's hilarious.
Oh, dude, nothing will ever quite compare to you could just tell that M. Night Shyamalan, when he wrote this in the screenplay, it was so brilliant. It all came together so brilliantly, you know, and I'm saying I've had these moments as a writer where I thought I was a genius and it turned out I wasn't. And like, I could just tell because he's got Mark Wahlberg and the rest of the heroes running from the wind in a field of grain. I'm like, they're running from grain. It's not scary. It's so bad. That's a bad movie. But it's classic. It's good old fashioned. This sounded like a good idea at the time. Bad is what it is. Because there were some things in there that weren't like terrible science fiction ideas. Like, oh, what if, I mean, that just doesn't work, but like, what if plants started fighting back?
Stop trying to defend it.
No, I'm saying
you
I'm not
out
defending
laughing.
it.
You can't can't rationalize this. No.
I'm not what I'm saying is I can understand making this mistake of being like, oh, what a fascinating, intriguing scientific concept. If plants can make bee colonies go kill themselves to like save their plants, you know, like maybe they could do it to humans, you know. It's like but it doesn't work as a horror movie because that's not scary. You know, the cordyceps thing in the last, now that's scary. Like, what if fungus could infect your brain and turn you into a zombie? Like, that's scary. But yeah, plants fighting back is not scary. It's just not.
Well, to be honest, there is a movie more hilarious by M. Night Shyamalan than The Happening. Lady in the Water takes the cake.
Did I see Lady in the Water? I think
there's a freaking kid reading a prop from the back of cereal boxes. You can't peak that in terms of hilarious bad writing.
I hated that movie. You know, because the first 2 films Shyamalan made were pretty good. Signs, that was good. Nice twist at the end. And then I really do like Unbreakable. I've always liked that film. I thought it was a very nice homage to comic book characters. I thought it was very cool. Interesting take. And then you had Signs, which, you know, everyone at the time loved that movie. But I remember coming out of the theater and saying, like, I mostly liked it. However, that ending was preposterous. How water covers 70% of the surface of the earth. How can it defeat an alien species? How could the alien species have not accounted for that? Like, you know what I mean? And everybody fought me on it. My friends were arguing, oh, that's not that hard to believe. And I'm like, what are you talking about? That ruins the whole movie for me. It's so stupid.
It's become a bit at my place of employment. I always bring up that fact about signs. The whole thing, like, you know, that I don't even know why I started doing it because it has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I always stoke into a tirade of, and for whatever reason in signs, the aliens that are aversive to water invade a planet mostly covered in water. I don't understand. I would just like end my arguments with that. Like, this is all nonsense.
Yeah.
What we're doing is food bar.
And his films only got worse from there. I mean, I will admit, I did like The Village, and but I understand why people hate it, and I pretty much agree with them that like the monsters not being real is a real that violates the promise of the premise, and that's the big problem with that film. Also, some people thought the whole concept was very cloying. I just kind of liked the character story in it between Bryce Dallas Howard and Joaquin Phoenix. I just liked that story, and that's literally the very last M. Night Shyamalan film that I could get any enjoyment from. There was that movie Devil that he made that wasn't bad.
Well,
kind
he
of a
produced
locked
it.
room. Oh, I guess so. He didn't write that one.
I think he may have wrote or he didn't direct it. I know that he had an involvement. It has all of his trademarks over it, so he probably wrote.
They advertised it as like his movie, Devil film,
which was interesting because that was not long after The Last Airbender. So I'm like, why do you want to be
that was in
associated with this
2010.
name?
Oh, directed by John Eric Dowdle, screenplay by Brian Nelson, from a story by M. Night Shyamalan. Well, that explains it.
There it is.
Because Devil's a mostly pretty good locked room monster in the house story. Not bad. Not bad at all. That explains it, that it was not. Because I'll tell you something. Actually, Split was pretty good. I take it back. Split is pretty good. Glass is his worst film of all time. Glass is one of the most laughable. I actually think Glass is funnier than The Happening. Because this I actually think is Shyamalan's downfall. I think he gets these ideas in his head that sound good on paper, but when you actually put it to film, it doesn't work at all. And the example in Glass is that the whole idea is you've got Mr. Glass, you've got Bruce Willis's guardian character, and then you've got the Split guy, the split personality guy, and they're all locked in an insane asylum together, and a battle royale is brewing. And Glass breaks the multiple personality guy out of the asylum, and he challenges David. I think that's the name of the character that Bruce Willis plays. He challenges David to a battle at the top of the Empire State Building. Now, the problem with this is that sounds pretty cool, and I was into that. I was like, oh, that's a cool idea. But what happens is the minute David gets to the parking lot, all three of them get attacked by the authorities, and it just devolves into a really sad, kind of pathetic battle in the parking lot of an insane asylum. It's actually almost like watching the Crazy Loons just thinking that they're in a battle royale when they're really just stuck in the parking lot. So it's actually pretty pathetic. And I just remember thinking, like, this is awful. This is awful. You can't tee up a premise like a battle at the top of the Empire State Building. It's the trilogy ender for your supposed superhero story, and you're going to end it in the parking lot? That's so stupid. So yeah, Glass is pretty bad. It's really a bad film. Well, Redoubt, I appreciate you hanging out, man. It's been fun.
It has been fun.
Yeah, we've been going almost 3 hours now. I didn't mean to keep you this long.
Oh, no, it's been great. It's been interesting. We've had 2 different videos. We had an hour and a half of Shogun, and the remaining time was a teaser for this Sunday's podcast.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
What is the captain working on? All right. Well, I think we'll pretty much wrap it up. What do you think, chat? I appreciate everyone being here. Lurkers, chat, everybody. Good to see you. You know, it's like, it is, I think we should probably, wait, wrong one. That's the one I'm looking for. There it is. That's our outro.
Zack Snyder stuff.
Dude, Zack Snyder, I love how it's part 1 at the end. That's so funny.
So what happens if Zack Snyder gets his hands on Shogun?
Yeah, it's just a lot of slow motion, just the sword going. And the gothic music, the drums, it's so neat. I love it. I love that. Well, thanks for hanging out. Redoubt Productions.
Yep.
I'll update the description with a link to your channel.
I would appreciate that. Yep. We should be back here next week to talk about the 4th installment of Shogun.
Indeed we will. So be there or be square. So yes, I am Captain Garrett of the channel Swords and Starships. Redoubt Productions. Check out his channel, a historian par excellence. So, who actually goes out and sees things in the world, which is, that's rare on the internet.
I go and touch grass, historical grass, occasionally, once in a while.
All right. Well, that is our show, chat, and until next time, this is Captain Garrett and Redoubt Productions saying we'll see you out there. If I could ever find the button. Now, I asked for sharks with frickin' lasers on their heads, and what do I get?
There we are.